would be fun, right? And I was just like, we'll have to move 200 chairs out of the room, then move them back in for 3:30. What? And that was a bit of a logistics issue. Like, it's going to take a while to do that. And it's not necessary to do the Eye of God journey in a Chandra configuration, at least not here. They're letting us know that the next couple of workshops that lead up to FOL are going to have the option of people wanting to do large group geometrics with us to assist in anchoring each of the large frequencies that are coming in that have to do with the Sala Kali chamber. So what we'll do is, I'm not sure, what time do you want to bring people together for that? Because the journey is, you don't have to do a lot of training for the journey, but at some point we're going to need to get your training, how you give, even in the 12 types classes, a basic rundown on how to do the later one, because the big one where we're asked to go into Chandra together is the one that's going to be run at night, in the evening, after all of the big stuff is released, because that's when the big frequencies are anchoring. And you don't have to, with any of this stuff, any of the techniques we've ever offered, nobody ever has to participate. There's no group pressure. Nobody's going to be mad at you or upset with you. If you don't want to, it's okay. It would help if you could let us know, though, because when we're doing Chandras, we need to know the head count, so we know how many people are there, which positions are going to be filled, and then they get broken into like who's running male energy, who's running female energy, who's running androgen energy. And that doesn't necessarily, I mean, we always get these people like, yeah, I'm a woman, but I want to run male energy tonight, and you can, right? You don't have to be stuck with the gender your body has. You can run whatever you feel most comfortable with at that time, and then you can change it next time you do a Chandra. So anyway, we're going to do the journey to the Eye of God, and this will help too, because the beloveds did point out that there's a lot of people that have traveled a lot to get here, and they're tired to begin with when you come off planes and all that. And then we already know we're going to be up late tomorrow night, or tonight, or whatever it is, Sunday night going into Monday, right? To do that to you 2 nights in a row when we don't have to isn't fair, especially to the people who are really tired. Because the Eye of God journey, you will still pick up the frequencies if you fall asleep during it. But the experience of it, where you have memory of it, and to be able to feel it and like get into it, because this has been one of the most moving ones. I remember when it came through, and usually I'm distracted enough by they're showing me the next bit, because it comes through live when those can come through. And when the Eye of God journey came through, even though I was having to have part of my consciousness listen directly to them as they're like showing me maps and saying, okay, now turn right, now turn left, do this, do that, go up here, go down there, because we're using the maps that you'll see in a little bit. It still I felt this. It doesn't even have a word, but it was like a sigh of relief, of just being surrounded by love, like none of the other things we've ever done. And we've had lots of that bits coming in. But this is a very precious journey. It also gets stronger the more you use it. Like, eventually we will have it out where everybody can use it, put the headset on and go in your bedroom and right to the Eye of God kind of thing. You can go, once you go on this journey once, even if you never hear the tape again, if you can just remember key little bits, the ones that seem to have the strongest feel for you, you can just bring those back to mind when you want to project. And projection is gliding. That is the beginning before you can slide. All right, so we will do that anyway for 1212, and we will get you to understand what that is, so you know what the Eye of God journey is about. The frequencies activated in the group at that time for 1212, it's closer to the evening time when we will be doing the large Chandra, and that's better than like doing it tonight, particularly if a bunch of people go to sleep, because it means they anchored it, but they anchored it in the astral, and it didn't get into their physical body yet. Those frequencies will come in, but it can take them a week or so to filter down from the astral field into the D3, D2, and D1 field, so they affect what your body can hold here. So it would be better if you're more awake and fresh and can enjoy the Eye of God journey, not just sleep through it and be glad you got there even though you can't remember. So I hope you don't mind, but we were asked to change that for the first thing that we will do tomorrow. And instead of having you wait till 3:30 for me to come in with graphs again, and Az will take you through that one. And we'll learn what we need to tonight for that on the rest of the graphs here. Then we will, I don't know what my day is going to look like, well, starting when I leave here tonight. I have to get some sleep or I'm just going to fall over, and that's usually about 2 to 3 hours, and it's like 8 to me, so if I can get that in. I've seen some of the graphology that goes with the information they're giving us. There's no way I'm going to get all of that done in the period of time we have here. It's at least 2 weeks of graphing. But there's enough that I can probably use the graphs we have and a few extra ones and a couple base graphs they had me prepare, and I didn't know why, before we left. I will be able to get the graphs together for you. So you can see enough, and I can explain where, yeah, there's about 5 graphs that go in between here and here, and 5 that go in between here and here. But it will get you through the information that we're all learning together, because the information on the Dale, we're just being given, bits of it. And all of the things that are on the itinerary as far as the teaching parts, what we're going to learn about tomorrow, these are 99% new to both Az and I. And, so it's going to be an interesting night for us as we get the information in and try to put it in legible form on a Mylar so we can pick up tomorrow, hopefully at 3:30. We try. Anyway, it might be a bit later, but we have to work with Guardian time when these kind of data flows come in. We don't have a choice. We can't say, well, we're not going to take it down if you don't send it down at this time. I really wonder, though, when it's night here, is it day there? So that's normal hours for them? Right? Yeah, I mentioned that to Az, and he said, do they even have night there? I don't know. Yeah, I haven't asked, actually. So anyway, what we're going to do is get through these graphs now. You've got through the Rasha body. You've got through the Big Bang, and you see where that fits. Now, what we're going to move into next, I believe, what should be next, yes, is seeing how that sequence that you just saw, that was the first time it happens as creation continues to grow, okay? So you had the first unicized seed atom born, the tar, and then the first seed atom, went through the Rosetta cycle, then to the first seed atom, and then from the first seed atom came the Rasha body, layers and layers and layers, and from that came the Eucatharista outer light body layers. That pertains to the inner domain. Now, the inner domain, the light body cycles are referred to as this. Now, these are the cycles of they're the equivalent of the tachyon cycles that we talked about with the Tarn. All right, the light body cycles are the yuga cycles. All right, there isn't a yuga cycle that goes with the core, but the seed atom unici is born here and starts the inner one. So there's stuff that we're going to learn about that has to do with beyond the creation point door, where the spirit body is, that actually births out the light body, because there is a light body here too, and therefore the core cycle also has an E-yuga cycle. Now, the cycles of the Rasha body, the dark matter template, that are what the light body forms on in any one of the domains, they are considered the Navajo cycles. So there are cycles within cycles here. And when the Navajo cycles, the Navajo creates the birth of Partakai 1 and Partakai 2 again. Now, once the first creation is done, there is a natural cycling of all of these cycles where the Rasha will cycle, or actually where the Tarn will cycle, and it will send energy out to the Rosetta will cycle, will send energy out to the seed atom will cycle and send energy to the pranaseed will cycle and charge the Rasha body, and the Rasha body will charge and send it out through the, what is the creation point there? I'm trying to think that that might be where dollies fit in. I don't know. There is something in that center point of the light body that connects into the prana seed of the Rasha body. So there's naturally cycles where there's bursts of energy that are released out through the whole sequence to charge the bodies and replenish them. And then there's natural cycles of phasing that occur where sparks are being generated, more quantum being generated, and then that generated quantum is sent back into source as backflow, and then there would be a cycle of backflow return. So all these cycles are really about the opening and closing of like a tube of energy that runs through the center of a very large sphere with many, 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 many little spheres inside of it. And at the first point inside that sphere that is the cosmic creation would be the first creation point. And later we'll get into what's in front of it and what's in back of it kind of thing. But if we can understand that what we just saw as the light-born cycle, the star-born cycle, and the life-born cycle, that leads up, the life-born cycle of the Rasha, leads up to the birth of the outer domain, outer level or outer sheathed body of the outer light body. And that starts the process, once that phases, starts the process all over again of the creation for the next set out. So we'll learn about what, behind the creation point door, created the light body for here and the Rasha body. And I think the light body for here, the Rasha body for here, I think it's the Pardaki. That's just something that just started to be coming in with a whole bunch of other scribbly stuff today. But here's the point where we would have the Unisai seed atom, which means the Unisai seed atom was the place where the next would be the Rasha cycle for the inner domain, because it's the inner seed atom. It implies that before the inner seed atom, there was a Naveho cycle, right? A prana exchange cycle of the Rasha that corresponds to the core, and that would birth out the Partakai 1 and Partakai 2 that would eventually build up to become the Taran and the seed atom for the inner cycle. So I'm still trying to get, okay, where do the Navehos go if you draw it in lines, right? Because we're looking at this strung out. These are actually showing cycles that are part of a sphere. So eventually, and this is what I was starting to get parts of how all these actually fit into a spherical configuration and what those spheres do with each other and what that has to do with all of the domain cycles and the cycle we're going through of the turnaround. But for now, if we can understand them as you have first creation point, and I always wondered why they did it this way, because they showed me to do it this way. Start here and work this way. So I'm working like from my right to my left. Okay, normally people read from left to right. So, all right, whatever. So we started there. I found out in the little scribbles why. You'll see that tomorrow. But to understand first that we have our core domain that is formed from the first creation point. Then we have here would be where the Unisai seed atom for the inner is. And then you would have the inner Rasha and the inner outer light body, the inner outer light body, the inner Yukatharista body around the inner Rasha. And then that, they would cycle. Now, the cycle of the light body would be a yuga, and the cycle of the Rasha body inside of it would be the Naveho cycle, considered a Naveho cycle, that corresponds to that particular part of the yuga cycle that was between the sixth cycle, between axis 6, the Hidaro part. It was between axis 5 and 6. With birth of I think that's what it is. I have to look at that to actually explain it. But I think you know what I mean. I'll clarify it later if I just confused you. Anyway, let's look at it strung out. We have a core that is formed first, the Unisai seed atom for the inner. Then from that, we have the inner Rasha body and light body outside of it. And then that forms the next Partakai and goes through its Naveho cycle, births out the Partakai for the next one, and that grows into becoming the seed atom for the middle. The seed atom for the middle is called the Shadi. All right, that's what we've worked with in the Sacred Sex classes, because it's directly connected to our bodies here in the outer through our private parts, where our outer seed atom is at the Azare in the outer body, but where the Azare and where the seed atom is in the Edonic body or the middle body, interfaces with our physical body here is where our private parts are and around the region of our base chakra. So there's a connection to all of, in our bodies, our physical bodies here in the outer domains, to all of these other layers of creation that we have had to move out through, which means we left a part of our consciousness in and an encryption of ourselves and our identity, our pure identities, our perfect templates as we came out. So we have the core domains, the inner domains. The next one's out from the Shadi seed atom are the middle domains, and then that goes through its Rasha cycle and then its light body cycle, and then that creates the Partakai for the next set, and those set of Partakai create the Tarn and create the seed atom for the outer, which is called the Yanesa seed atom that we talked about a lot in the Kathara 2-3 program, the crystal body program. And from that births out the Rasha of the outer domain and the light body of the outer domain, or the Yukatharista body of the outer domain that is our Ekamappus of the God world gates. All right, so this is the structure. This set of 4 moving outward from the creation point are called the Ikashi cycles, or the Akashi cycles. And they are the Akashi expansion cycles, moving forward from creation point, from that point of creation. Now, each one of them have all sorts of characteristics associated with them. The first thing associated with them is a particular name of the rasha body that corresponds to that level. The rasha body for the core is simply called the, I think this one's, they just refer to this as the rasha. The rasha body for, and the rasha A, they call the cycle that, but I'm not sure if they call the thingy that. See that we're still just working on these. That's why we haven't released them anywhere. We're still trying to get all the words right and all the spellings right. All right, since I have it there, I'll say the rasha body for the core is referred to as the rasha A. All right, so this would be the rasha A cycle, Navajo cycles. The rasha A Navajo cycles are called the Yamu Navajo cycles, and each Navajo cycle has a Nava phase of rounds 1 through 4, a Nave phase of rounds 5 through 8, a Navi phase that ends in a Navi harmonic of rounds 9 through 12, and each one of those corresponds to one of the rings and span sets of the rasha body. And then I just lost myself. Okay, 1 through 12, right. All right, let me see where it's going with that. Let me see what interrupted me first. Hold on, I came in from right. Hello, what's up there? There's something over there. That's the second time something weird's happened in the last hour or so. I saw a thing that looked like a cross between a rat and a prairie dog, but it was about that big, and it ran right in front of where we were walking to go to the hotel room, and I realized as I kind of went like that to try not to walk into it, it wasn't solid, which was weird. And I just got another something or other coming on over there. The blows are right, though, they're saying. Anyway, they're saying get on with it. They don't have to spend forever on rashas. Anyway, right? Right. Yeah, is that them or is that you collectively? Right. So we have the rasha A body and cycle. This corresponds to the Navajo cycle that would be called the Yamu Navajosa. All right. And that has its 4 stages. Let's just leave it at that. Then when we get out here, we have in the inner, and these, by the way, the cells in these, the main cells structures, are referred to as the etons. All right. When we get out here to the next one out, which is the inner, this cycle, the rasha body is called the rashala. The rashala body also corresponds to, remember the Elan, Shalon, and Kalon sets that we talked about in rasha structure? Well, each one of these kind of works in a larger body that we'll see more of tomorrow. They each serve as parts of a larger structure, the spirit body. And in that larger part, this whole cycle it is predominantly an Elan structure. And this is where we get the names of yugas that go with them, where the yuga is the outer light body structure. All right, this is called the Ale Yuga because this is predominantly the Elan storage part of the larger spirit body. All right, and so that's Yuga 2. Yuga 1 was here, the outer light body structure, the light body structure of the core cycle. That I think they refer to as the Rale Yuga. The Ale Yuga is the inner one, and the Yuga, again, is the light body cycle. And inside of that, you have the rasha body, which here would be the rashala, and that would have its Navajo cycle. The Navajo cycle for the inner is referred to as the Kamu Navajosa. So you will see these prefixes when we use ringtones and span tones, depending on which rasha you are trying to activate, which currents you are trying to bring into the body out here. It will depend on which tones you use, which prefix you use with the tone sets, because all the rings and spans have the same tones, right? But it qualifies which domain you're trying to open energy from by using the prefix. This one would be the Yamu Navajosa, so the Yamu prefix. This one is Kamu, C-O-M-U. All right, that is the one for the inner. When we get out here to the next one, which is called the middles. Oh, by the way, these are called the Adon units. It's Adonic matter, and the units are called Adons. Where these are Etons in the core. These are called Adons, and it's referred to as Adonic matter. All right, the next one out is the middle. This is return to Eden. All right, and this is what happens when you do your first starfire and enter an Adashi 1 cycle. All right, you have the Edonic matter, The edons are the names of the balls within balls. All right, the light cells are referred to as edons. This corresponds to, on the larger spiritual body, the Shalon band. Remember, we had the Elon band, the Shalon band. This corresponds to that, and that's why it's called the Shale Yuga. It's the third Yuga, the Shale Yuga cycle. And the Rasha body that goes with this is called the Rashali body. So you have Rashali in the middle, you have Rashala in the inner, and Rashae in the core. I still think it's just Rasha. But anyway. So we have one more set of them to go, and that's the third Yuga there. And this would have a Navajo cycle with it. This one, Kamu, the Kemu, the Shamu, and the Shemu. This one, I believe, is called I have it on another chart, the Kemu Navajosa. So Kemu, K-A-M-U, would be the prefix with the ringtones when you're trying to open the currents between here and here. And we've actually, each one of the tribes classes, the tribes 1, whole set of 12 tribes 1 classes, were supposed to, they were referred to as the Council of Rashala. They carried the codes, the ones who ended up. That's why the Beloveds had it done by lottery down here, so they could tweak it from up there through the electricals, because they knew by frequency read, who had the codes for which ones in their bodies. So the people that got put in the tribe 1 set were actually the ones that carried these codes. And they were together collectively activating each class, each one tribe's class of tribes 1, activated one of the rings of the Rashala body in the Aquafarian host shield on the planet. When we got all through the 12 of them, then we were supposed to go into the tribes 2 classes. And the tribes 2 classes were the councils, and still are, of Rashali. The Rashali ones would have done the same thing. And starting with class 1, ring 1, would have progressively activated this part of the Rasha currents in the Aquafarian shield and host field. Each one of these corresponds to a level of what's called aquiline sun activations of the gyrodome host field on the planet that we'll talk about later. And then there's supposed to be a big event, because this one out here is called, the outer one, is called the Navajo cycle for it is called the Shamu Navajosa. And it was a calling of the shaman, where this set of people, and there were 24 in each of those classes, 12 classes each with 24. These we're going to have 12 classes each with up to 48. We're going to get them all together and do a huge, big Shadra shield and an event referred to as calling of the shaman. This was supposed to be done when later we were going to hit the kale-hara point. The Beloved saw what was happening, and they have had to expedite since Peru, and we'll talk about why tomorrow, why they had to expedite what happened during the time we were in Peru, what happened with the FA groups and what they've done, that pushed it all, where this whole set was literally activated by the Aquafarian races on the Adore side. They just literally, in one night, blasted it into activation. They had to. Because what has to be done, we were only halfway through. I think we're up to class 4, which means ring 4 here. We still had all of these, the rest of these rings, all of these rings, and all of these rings to activate before those frequencies that would allow us to enter the first point of the kale-hara would happen. Well, if this planet and solar system went into kale-hara before the Aquafarian shield did, the Aquafarian shield wouldn't be able to anchor it. We'd get flattened by those frequencies just like anybody else would here that didn't have the aparthi open to receive them. So there was a push since Peru when we went in May, the Hitharo in May. And this one has been fully activated already. The rest of these were fully activated in Peru. These were activated in Peru, and they were going to save those for this. They were going to open both ends at the same time and let them meet and just run all the way through. So that and that were finished in Peru. The 12 Tribes 1 Rashala Council, Class 5, started with activation of Ring 5 out here. All right, Class 6 activated Ring 6 out here. When we hit the point of all of the rings out to 12, that's when I believe the Navi harmonic hits when 12, and then there's things that I still can't describe without looking at detailed graphs. But that is when we hit 12 activation, and then we start going into the frequency leap or fall. The leap would be where we generate enough frequency and activate enough of the bodies that opens the doorways between these core flows. Now, way back here somewhere, and actually at every transition point, before you get to the birth of the Taran for each one, there is something called the Eye of God. It forms from something called the Kusha crystal, and each domain has a Kusha crystal. In a turnaround cycle, the Kusha crystals and the eyes of God progressively open. Well, the Kusha crystals are stimulated, they open, they cause the eyes of God to phase and spark. And that begins the opening of what are called the Eye of God's core currents, or the kryst blood currents, or the lavas. They're referred to as the lavas, the currents of love. Where's the love? There's the love. Right, way back there behind the creation point door. Because what they do is allow the frequencies from behind the creation point door to come all the way through the Rasha bodies out into each level of the light body, all the way out here until we get to the outer body. And that is what gives us enough frequency to make the shift where we would go through the Hara cycles and into a full kryst activation, and then make the rest of it's a 180-degree shift, turnaround, right, where you make the 90-degree shift and hit kryst activation, and then make another 90-degree shift to enter the Adashi 1 cycle. The Adashi 1 cycles are up here. Now, if we could pull this down a little, honey, please. Hello. Thank you. As we have 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a very simple way of showing the Adashi turnaround cycles. We'd finish the cycles out here, and these, by the way, these yugas, the light body cycles, are called the kale yugas, because this is where the Kalon bands would be. So you had the Elon bands, Ale Yuga, the Shalon bands, the Shale Yuga, and the Kalon bands, the Kali Yuga. So that's where those teachings, any teachings that spell it Kali, that they were pulled from this information that was about, only giving you part of the information about the cycles in the Kali Yuga. The Mayans knew parts of it. The Sanskrit people have known parts of it for a long time, but nobody has had any of this since quite a ways back in Atlantis, actually. These were some of the teachings because they could show. There were ways, the teachings that went with this, that taught some of the technicals, that with the Atlantean mind, because it was not as mutated as ours, and they were still extremely intelligent, and the FAs that were there at the time, fallen angelics there, they could do a lot of harm. So some of the teachings were actually taken back by the Eartha people, and like books and things that had some of it in it, because they were going to use them to try to take over Eartha and wipe out the Kryst host here, which would have taken Earth out, and we wouldn't be having this conversation now. So there was the whole books of Kale were never brought. The books of Kale correspond to this transition and getting into Adashi 1, and they're the teachings that correspond to the transition and correspond to living and existing in the reality, three-dimensional reality domains of this space. Each one of these Adashi cycles, these are the respiritualization of matter cycles, where when we come out here from creation point, if you have behind the door of creation point, you have what would be considered a spirit body. So you have X amount of quantum in spirit and X amount manifest. The first has 1/3 manifest, and the rest of its quantum still in spirit body. That's the core. The inner has half of its quantum manifest in each. Half manifest on this side of the door, and half manifest on spirit side of the door, in the spirit body. This one has, so we have 1/3, 1/2. This one has 2/3 of its energy, its quantum manifest on the manifest side, and 1/3 in spirit body. And when you get out to here, and this is why it's the most vulnerable cycle, and it's the only place things can actually fall, that you can actually lose cognition of connection that deeply, is there is 3/3 of its quantum are actually in manifestation, and none of its quantum are in spirit, but its spirit body is fully connected through this connection line, which actually is a center point, because all these, you're seeing spheres within spheres, just like I had strung out the kale-hara grids to show you the formation of the cells, the cell expansions of the Rosetta, and then I showed you how they were all put together, right, where there's one center point, and all those kale-hara grids were in the same place, but they were just different sized cells that were on them. Well, these are also in the same place. They're connected by the same center points. And boy, is that complex. That's some of the stuff I saw for the first time, the graphs that were just starting to come down in little tiny, they come in micro form, like microchips, and they end up in little scribbled diagrams that are so tiny. And I look at them later and go, why do I do that? It's because they come in that way. They come in condensed, and then I've got to pull them out and expand them out and turn them into something you might be able to look at or read. But anyway, these are the yuga cycles. This is the turnaround cycle. The first point of entering that turnaround cycle is the kale-hara. This is the hara cycle. The kale-hara, halfway through the kale-hara, you reach what is called the kale-krysta point and enter the kale-krysta part of the hara cycle, and that is a point where you actually hit a point of half and half. You go into a rasha state that is equivalent to Adanic matter. Now, Adanic matter of the inners, that is where we had 1/3 out in manifestation. We had half in manifestation and half in spirit. So you enter an Adanic state in order to make the change. All right? And means you have to have these frequencies and these open in your rasha bodies out here. If your light body is going to have enough charge or joule quotient or quantum thrust to make that leap in quantum, which is a leap in speed as far as spin speed, that will allow for you to override the angular rotation of particle spin that your particles in an outer domain are in right now, and shift the angular rotation of particle spin into the natural axis angle that goes with the Adashi 1 cycle. So this is what we're about to engage. And we have entered it early. It wasn't, we were due, by the end of the 12 Tribes 2 classes is when they were preparing for that, preparing us for that, where we would have had this open and that open, then we could have kind of taken our time with this and with that, and gotten around to when the Sala Kali chamber was anchoring and opening on the planet. It's doing that tomorrow. And yeah, so we're doing the crash course. That's why, as far as typesetting or anything, if I can even articulate it enough where I can get the idea of how pieces fit, to you, that's good enough for now. There's lots of detail, but it's important that we understand what is happening, because right now it is the Aquafarian shield, the indigo shield, and the angelic human, particularly those with Aquari coding, that stand between the potentials of any ascension left in the system at all, and very bad radiation burns within 50 years that begin a very, very bad cycle of fall that will be very unpleasant, that will probably be headed off at first with a rapid pole shift, so we won't have to worry about it in the first place while we're in our bodies, because it will shift the poles so fast here that we'll have a 3-day flip. And you have a 3-day flip, your oceans and mountains are no longer in the same places. And if your oceans and mountains aren't, neither are your houses, your cars, or your bodies. You know what I mean? Right? And that would mean that the spirit in our bodies, the spirit parts of our consciousness, not just the parts that make up our bodies, but there's a spirit essence that gives that third element where you have egg and sperm, and mane and ire, the manu spirit part. Right? That part is the part that you try to get out. If you're going to die a body, you try to get that out in bardo so you don't end up with yourself stuck. We would be stuck if it happened that way. So this is really big, what we're in the middle of. Fortunately, it's been very quiet so far. Nothing major has gone off. There's always quaking over in Indonesia anymore, it seems. And they have, and then the tsunamis that started a couple of years back, all of that's connected. But we haven't seen, for the energy that's been flying here, it's been really, really calm. Let's hope it stays that way. So what we're doing is this transition. We have a Dashi 1 cycle, and that's the one we will go into. I don't know how many years these last. These yugas, at some point I have to correlate the old stuff from the cosmic clock things that told us how long yugas lasted. Now there are yugas on the planetary level, on the solar level, on the galactic level, on the universal level, and even bigger and up further from there on the entire domain structure level. But just in one domain, you would have them on each of those levels. And then each of the levels of the Eka, the Veka, the Eka, the Akasha, the Akasha A, the Akasha Aya, they would all have their own yuga cycles because they have their own light body structure that the smaller pieces are in, and they're all connected as far as who's releasing energy and what's releasing energy, what's sending backflow, what's sending backflow return. What we're facing right now is not just planetary and not just solar. Our solar is aligning with the universal Veka Kali Yuga. And this is a falling universal Veka system, except for those planets who a long time ago received a host gift from a collective of 3 different Akashas that got together, guardian groups that were not fallen, Christian groups that are of a continual guardian nature, where they have no fall in their matrix and they use their free will only in service of the Kryst, and they chose to be that way, and they chose their whole matrix in their free will to give their free will back to Source to be able to help in case things like this happened in the outer systems. So we were given a long time ago as part of a much larger problem that involves our Veka, but also involves 2 other Eka-Veka systems that aren't even in our Akasha. We were given what was called the Crystal River Host. Part of the technicals of the Crystal River Host is a set of mechanisms, they're organic mechanisms, in a planetary Templar that can be used in the event, between light body structure and Rasha body structure and spirit body structure, that can be used in the event of a potentially inevitable fall, which was the category our Universal Veka fell into quite a long time ago. And it starts with what is called an aurora field, which is a particular type of light field. And first it requires that if a planet or a star has fallen to a certain degree, there's a chance of hosting it into a star that is still viable. And that's what was done in the Amente rescue mission with both our Sun and our Earth. Earth and all of the planets in this system were originally part of Tara, which was Universal Stargate 5 and Density 2 in this system. So we have been a hosting system for a long time. And in that hosting system, we have the ability to, if this gyrodome, they call it a gyrodome because it forms a gyrating dome. It's actually a gyrating sphere, but only half of it is here, and the other half goes through the Adori side that's on the opposite rotation. So it's a gyrating sphere that would look like a dome because you can only see half of it. So they refer to it as the gyrodome. But it creates literally, it takes the original hosting imprint of the star body or planet that is falling, and it combines it with an imprint, the lower frequency imprint of the larger star structure that was hosting it, and it literally births a new 3-dimensional reality field as an evacuation station that has the capability of, as long as a host line is run from a different system that is not falling at all, they can go through the Kali change, the end of a Kali Yuga, and they can actually still ascend from this particular outer domain into the next Adashi domain. And that's what this whole thing, we've talked about gyrodomes, aurora fields, all of these things, they're all a part of this original gift of the Kryst that was given to us a long time ago. There were several other star systems that were going into fall crisis in our Universal Veka system long before Earth did, and they were also given gyrodome technologies. One of those is Sirius B, which is Universal Stargate 6 in our Universal Veka system. When it's the 6 Kathara Center 6 on the Kathara grid, and when you realize they're the Universal Stargates as well, Sirius B is the Density 2 Stargate. There was also the Density 3 Stargate, Andromeda 9. So we have the 3, the 6, and the 9 line up, running up on the one side, whatever side is. I used to look at them and turn around this way as if I am them. On the 369 side of the Kathara grid, that runs a particular line where the fields that are created in each of these has a gyrodome field. All right, when it's activated, the one in USG3, which would be around Earth, would allow for the rebirth, a very rapid rebirth of an ascension Earth imprint, part Earth, part Eartha. And that would be the Density 1 level. On Density 2, it would have Sirius B, and is also connected to Density 2 Sala, which is the USG4 on the outer, but it connects in to the Eden domains. So it takes a step in, goes up to Density 2, and takes a step in to the Edens. When it gets to Density 3, it's connected into Andromeda. That takes a step into the Adons. So it's actually taking the frequencies back through, and it's allowing the frequency support of the Rasha body. A period of time evolving in that particular structure that's created by the gyrodomes will allow a progressive ascension where we can go into a full, and there will be a point where the ascension Earth, ascension Sirspi, and ascension Andromeda will be able to complete a full kale-hara cycle and go into the Adashi ascension cycles. Eartha, our host star, because of the frequencies, and there are certain frequency points that trigger that moment as far as when that turnaround begins. And once it starts, you don't stop it. It's a natural phenomena that occurs in natural physics of light body and Rasha body dynamics. They are going through starfire because of the frequencies that were flying here and things that happened here. It triggered the Eartha body starfire program. They are going into starfire between 2047 and 2052. They are going into this swing, which means Earth is going to be hanging here. It would be falling here. It would be imploding if it weren't for the fact that the gyrodome field is here to hold it intact, to serve as its surrogate host, because its host is starfiring. Earth can't starfire. Earth's best chance, now the ascension Earth, which is formed by that surrogate host field that is the gyrodome aurora field, that is the new Earth, ascension Earth, the Earth that we are standing on now, whatever can pick up enough, regenerate enough frequency where it can make it into slide into the aurora fields, will be able to rejoin the ascension path. Things that will not will have two choices. One, as long as everything works out well and the host stays, they will be, when you get to the point where you naturally make the leaps and go into the turns, if you can't make that certain point when you go past the 7, then you go past the 0 point. At a certain point there, if you don't have a certain BPR, base pulse rhythm, which has to do with the core vibration of your encryption in the body, instead of going for the rise where it'll trigger the opening of these currents that allow for these to fully come in so you can make that leap, you spiral back down into the core frequencies and then turn around and go backwards and get popped out this way. But the shield shatters in the pop. It's called the passage of the ring of fire. It means that as long as you do it properly on what's called a natural Bardo wave, which is after the Bardo separation, where you've got all of the 15 layers of the Rasha separated from the 15 layers of the light body structure, there is one final gasp, one final, and it opens. There's a backdraft that pulls an opening just for a moment. And that allows for anything, any of the spirit body, consciousness still here, to pass through. But it can't take a body form with it. But as long as it rides the Bardo wave, the encryption of the body form will ride with it, and it can reassemble once it gets back here. It will go back in here into the Edonic cycles, have to birth out again and do the Edonic Yuga again, and then birth out again here and do the Yuga here. But they can get the chance to go back into the next cycle. These cycles are referred to as the starfire cycle, that turnaround cycle. When we talk about starfire cycle, that is a starfire cycle. So, this is what we're in the middle of. There's lots of new words. There's lots of new concepts. I'm surprised I'm still standing and haven't gone mad, actually, with these graphs. But I hope this is enough to begin showing you what I mean by Akashi cycles. The Akashi are the expansion cycles of creation coming out. And then there's the turnaround starfire cycle. And then there's the Adashi return cycles, of which there are 3. There's actually a very specific alignment of these that I'm hoping to get the graphs done enough to show you the concept. That goes back to something I think we introduced in Kathara 2.3 somewhere in there in those technicals that had to do with transfiguration waves. And on a small level, our DNA is structured that way. On a big level, this whole thing is structured that way. So for now, you're seeing them strung out in linear form. We'll try to have it where you can see the relationship with the eye of God. First eye of God forms here. It forms during that the second, what do they call it, trimester of the Siddha cycle, the Akushate cycle. That's where the eye of God structure forms. And we want to get you there so when you come back tomorrow and you're wide awake, you'll be able to go and visit the eye of God and hopefully remember it. But you'll know where it is. That is the first eye of God, right? The one that was created first. There would be one that corresponds with the creation of the inner. So that was the core one. One that corresponds with the middle. One that corresponds with the outer. There'd be one that corresponds with each of the Adashis. This particular tape in it, you will listen to the one that carries the wave. It was released in, what was that? That was when Ring 5 was activated. Yeah, Ring 5. When Ring 5 of Rasha out here was activated in Tribes 1 classes, class number 5, this is when the beloveds knew that we were on the real rapid cycle and they had to get the frequencies out here. They took us up to what are called the Adashi temples, which you'll see where they are in a minute. And from there, they took us on this really neat journey with the help of the Adonai from the Adore side, which is the counterclockwise in the same space as us, but moving counterclockwise side. And they opened this stream here, and they took us on a journey back to here, to what was called the Tunnel of Love in the Eye of God. And I've never felt frequencies like that before. It was just, for me, it was incredible. And I find it even more incredible that I can say that while having the distraction of having to listen to them to make sure the words came out right? Because I don't trance. We're not allowed to trance, we're not allowed to channel and that kind of stuff. So I have to hear what it is and then reiterate it here and bring it back out. So I still just kind of melted. And was able to go back, just like bounce back, by remembering a couple of scenes from the visuals, on the tape as they went by or as the meditation went by. You can do this too. This is the one you're going to be listening to tomorrow first, that will, before you get a live activation thing that's happening in the evening. But it's opening this whole stream. Now, when that stream opens, when this opens, it's triggering what are called the Kusha crystals that are associated with the Eye of God. And each of those, and it's beginning the process of literally opening the flows, the core flows, all the way through. This is essential at this point that it is done here. And it's only the beginning. Once the core flows are open, we can progressively bring more of the flows into the body. We've got them activated in the rashas, but now we have to bring them into the light body structure out here in order to be able to begin the re-spiritualization and de-densification of the atomic matter. So, okay, I think I'm done with this one. Yes? Yes. Okay, next one, please. It's an awful lot of information lately since Tribes 1, Class 1. All of this has come in since then, since January. Okay, this is showing the same cycle, and the only reason this was the first graph that was a lot more messy. A lot more. It's showing you the same thing, but it has some other words on it. Eventually, I'm going to consolidate all these things as information about those domains. And this has to do with the most important thing that I wanted you to see on this, those cycles, which would be the core, the middle, the core, the inner, the middle, the outer, Adashi 1, Adashi 2, Adashi 3. They each have states of matter and consciousness associated with them. And that's where when you see words like Sati, Seta, and stuff, this is what they're referring to. So here in the core domain, you have the Yuna, Siddha states of matter and consciousness. Here in the inner domain, you have the Yuma state. In the middle domain, you have the Sadi state. In the outer domain, you have the Seta state. When you go through the Christ star transition through the star 5 cycle and come over here into the Adashi 1 cycle, you have the Sadi Seta state. So when we do Sati Seta projection journeys, what we're doing is bringing in the frequencies that take us there progressively. And that's the first thing. There's three things. The most exciting would be to span. If you get to the point where you can span, it means you can take your body not just to the Ascension Earth host field, but you can take it all the way to Earth's surface and experience Earth's surface as physical. And between 2047 and 2052, you would be able to ride Starfire then and ride right in with Eartha. Now, that's not going to happen for most people. There might be a few. I don't know. I wouldn't doubt it. The universe is always full of surprises, and some of them are good. Yeah. So anyway, there's a comic relief there. It came from somewhere. I don't know where that came from either. But anyway, Eartha is doing that in 2047, 2052. Where was I going with that? Something about what happens to the ones who aren't going. We're going to the... what we are aiming for first, that's called spanning, by the way. That's being able to travel fully, to activate all of the spans. And remember, the spans are the crystalline bands between the rings in the Rasha body layers. The spans connect directly on the light body levels to what are called the orbs. The orbs are crystalline orbs that are between each of the 15 auric field layers. You know how you see little orbs floating around sometimes, or people are snapping pictures of orbs? Well, they're usually not our guys orbing. There's other forms of orbs you can do with your field and activate them with reverse currents, and that's what most of those things are that people get photographs of. However, a natural orb forms as you activate the levels of the rasha, which activate the levels of the light body field, and there are levels of progression where certain orbs form. At a certain point, you're able to hit a 0G force point, which means basically your bottom and top Merkabas spin at the same speed but opposite directions always, never same spin sets, because that's Metatronic and that's death of your seed atom. But you get to the same spin and it actually all stops. You go so fast that, and reach same spin on top and bottom Merkabas, and they stop. And you hit a point of going in to the Edonic matter state. And that's the point we need to be able to reach in order to go. We have to begin the point, let's see, I believe that's the halfway point, the Kale-Krista point, where it begins the full activation of the Kryst star capsule, which is capable of the full 90-degree shift, then the rest of the 90-degree shift over into the proper angular rotation of particle spin for a Dashi-1. We don't have to accomplish this by 2047, thankfully, because of the ascension Earth and its host field. We have about 223 years while that host field still stays viable, and in that period, right before the end of that period, Earth will have connected. Its gyrodome fields will connect with the Sirius B ones, will connect with the Andromeda ones, where we will be able to go back in. Earth will be able to starfire with its set because of the gyrodome host field. So that is what we're aiming for. And you never know. I mean, if this works well enough and things go as they're supposed to, there are many of us who may choose to keep these same bodies, and 223 years from now, you'll still be looking in the mirror saying, yep, still there. Hopefully a lot healthier than it might feel now, because you should be able to also, when you hit certain points in this, go into cellular regenesis, which means there is a certain peak point, and it's usually about the age of 33 in the activations of what happens in a body when it grows, and there is like a perfect balance point as far as the matter form. We degrade past that point here because of the mutation, and that's why our bodies die. There is a potentiality of regenerating cellular structure and rejuvenating the body back to its peak point around the age of 33. And that would be your Krysted body, and you could orb in it, which means you could disappear, turn into a bit of light, and then deorb and come back into manifestation. And then if you want to go someplace again in any of the cycles, you could pull yourself into orb and go. Yeah. So it's called orbing once you get to full Kryster activation, but it's Krysted orbing, not the kind of orbing that ones from places called hibernation zones do and other nasty places. So we'll find out about hibernation zones in a minute or two. Not a whole lot. I'm going to cover more of that when I want to talk about the general parameter first and just get you associated with the vertical maps and what that has to do with Russia. So when we get to the Eye of God, because that's the most important thing to get to tonight, you'll understand where Russia fits with the planet we're standing on and those kind of things. But there's some of the negative things about what is happening on the planet that has caused the need for this expedited activation of the Rashas. We will talk about that tomorrow and what it means and what we do, what we're being asked to do from there. We're not being asked to do any favors for somebody else. They're doing us a favor by bringing the information here, because without it, we'd be taking a nice, probably not so slow roll back down from this point, if we're lucky being able to get out at this point. When this point opens, the end of the Bardo for this system will be the point when the full Bardo and what's called the Barday, the end of the Bardo cycle, for Earth, for Sol, for our Sun, occurs. And that's when what's called the Nova cycle begins. The Nova cycle will last about 2 billion years, but nothing can live here by that time. All right, so this, in a 223-year period, this is when they have to pull the host line out, because this is when the Sun is going to release that final gasp that allows for that one final opening of the backward door, the Dali backward door, and will allow for the consciousness field that is still viable here, that can't make it into this spin, to get out that way. Because otherwise, it will ride through a nova cycle. And that doesn't mean it will immediately blow up and disappear. But it will become dead, because there will be no life force being able to circulate, no prana coming back and forth. The mutations that does to races very quickly, as far as losing the ability to reproduce, losing the ability to biologically live without mechanical support, it becomes really, really awful. And the systems of control and malice that go into that state, the systems become very degraded in consciousness. Kind of like some of the nasty sci-fi movies you see, like, after the Holocaust kind of thing, where there's just really nasty people running around doing horrible things, and lots of metal, lots of machine-y type things, and that kind of... There would be a cycle of progressive going downhill of what was left of any life force that survived. And it wouldn't be a pretty picture. Eventually, the radiation would be so great it would kill everything in a biological form here. And if something dies here, even if it gets vaporized, it still leaves calorine dust here that stays in the planetary shields, in the planetary matter body. And eventually, you can reincarnate from here, reincarnate over and over and over again, losing charge, losing the light body, like the shield structure, losing your quantum with each incarnation. That's what the path of reincarnation is. It's like regurgitation over and over and over and over till you can't throw up anymore. It's just like, really, it is not the path of going backward. That is the path of rebirth, where you get reborn. You come back out this way and try it again. This is the path of ascension. That is the path of reincarnation, the path of fall. And it usually takes a long time. It's a miserable existence. And the mercy at the end of it is being able to go through the implosion and explosion of nova, because it's a lot more peaceful being particle dust than trying to exist as a consciousness with an identity and a memory in a condition like that. So this planet will become, at that point, as will our sun, a dead system. Even though its body will still be intact, it will no longer have any life force within it. Whatever was viable will go back out with that wave. If it can't make it up through either the starfire of Eartha and Sala, or the ascension field, the gyrodome field that is being generated for the new ascension Earth, it will go out that way. And whatever doesn't will become trapped here and eventually ride out a nova cycle, dying probably of radiation poisoning, bodily dying of radiation poisoning, and getting stuck in the planetary grids until probably about 2 billion years away. It will do the things that they tell you about novas. Now, usually they say novas occur in suns that have a solar mass of 7 or greater, which means 7 times the mass of our sun. What nobody here realizes is this is a binary sun system. It's a binary star system. And Sala isn't one of them. There's a piece of what was Sol that was stuck in density too, actually stuck in the Eumbic void between them. It is called Rabizod, and it is called the dark fallen sun. That is the other part. They will merge in the Eumbic, through the Eumbic void. And it alone has 7 times the mass of our sun. You put ours with it, you got 8 times the mass of what we call our sun, and that is definitely nova. All right, so that you go red giant stage. You do all sorts of nasty things happen in your solar system. We're not going to be around for that, but that is the path that is unfolding here, and it is a path of no return in that regard. You can't stop that particular set of things happening. When the sun goes into Bardo, that is evac time in any solar system. And we have a period of time in which to do that. So, anyway, next one, please. Almost there. There's a lot on these, and I could spend 2 days on these alone that are coming. I won't, just so you know, not this particular one, but the ones that are coming right after it. I will give you a basic rundown so you understand when you project to an Adashi temple that you know where it is and what that means. All right? So you know where it is in relation to other things around you and what you've just learned. Now, what I want to show you on the personal level, we've talked about Rasha bodies, right? When we talked about the Rasha bodies, which are the dark matter bodies, right? And they're not dark. They just look dark from here because they're a different angular rotation of particle spin. So we've been looking at them this way, without little faces on them yet. But we've been looking at this being their top, right, with the Cathara grid, and that being their bottom. And then their 12 band would be here. That 12.5 span would be the one running here, and then out to 15 would be here, right? So that particular one that would come out to here would be the Rasha body. Now, it's at that same interesting spin expansion spin expansion ratio. That's the word I meant. All right, radio. And the spin expansion actually will put the Rasha body at a 45-degree angle and smaller, proportionally smaller, to the larger light body structure that forms around it. Now, if we look at this set right in here, there's another set of Cathara grids. See them going this way? When we've done chakra diagrams, we've used the D3 level of our outer light body Cathara grid to show those. So this would be the D3 Cathara grid. This would be the density level. Remember, there are 4 sheaths, D1, D2, D3, and then the density level one around that, right, which is different than D4. You know, it's similar but different. This has been what we were looking at in diagrams when we looked at the embedded Cathara grids of the physical body system. So our light body structure is at a 45-degree angle, where the 9 Cathara center would be on our light on our light body is where the 12 point is of our Rasha body. So we've been looking at Rasha for a while, so I put this one as the one that's running vertical right now. What you get when you take this and put it back the way we're used to looking at the Cathara manual and that kind of thing. Can I see the next one, please? Yep. It gives you this. Now, that's this, right? When you look at these diagrams as if you are the diagram. That's how they're designed. So this is the right. There's a little head over the shoulder in the mentor space. From Cathara 1, they were teaching us this stuff, the entry levels. When they talked about the mentor space and opening the mentor space over here, over your right shoulder, that's where your Rasha body head would be, right? And when you go into Kryst star activation, you progressively shift your angular rotation of particle spin into that first, and then from there you can shift into the bigger shifts that are needed to go through a full starfire cycle. But our mentor has been ourselves all along. It's been the part of ourselves that is in the Rasha stage, because we have a part of our identity and consciousness in there too, just like we have a part in density 2 and density 3 going up the light body, outer light body chain. We also have the parts that go inward. So our mentor has been a very good mentor that meant us well, because it is a part of us. So we are becoming our mentors. We're becoming our own mentors, basically. Next one, please. Oh, I can see the table through the pile now. It's not that I don't love this information. It's just, it gets really tiring sometimes, trying to explain it all. Now, when we talk about Kryst star, when the Kryst star vehicle fully activates, this is called the Kryst star crystal capsule. Crystalline capsule forms around and in your fields. And we'll show you what the Rasha body and the field levels do in relation to that in a minute. There's another diagram. But it allows you, this is like, say this is Earth down here. Think of jet propulsion. If you start getting hot feet as you go, as you begin working with these type of activations, it has to do with the chakras in your feet, around the balls of your feet, and the ones in your heels as well, where you may find hot foot happening sometimes. There will be a point in time once the body matter is de-densified to a sufficient level where it's not going to get fried by those frequencies. You couldn't activate a Kryst star vehicle right now. You'd vaporize your body, because the matter particles have to be gently and slowly and in the right sequence re-spiritualized and de-densified by the natural processes inherent to Rasha body activation, where the right sets of frequencies come in at the right times and those kind of things. But it will eventually get to the point when you hit that 0G state, you can levitate, first of all. You can go into full orb, which means completely turn into light, not just lighter matter, right? It's an amazing new world. It is a new world. It is a world like nothing that we've had here for a very, very long time, but we've seen little glimpses in sci-fi and that kind of stuff on TV and in movies and books and that kind of stuff. Those things are just little bits of race memory left behind. About once upon a time, somebody could do this. Or maybe we just wished we could. Angelic humans should be able to orb. A 12-strand pattern should be able to orb. Most things, which means go into some degree of starfire. Same thing with animals. The original animal forms on this planet would have been able to go through a version of it. It is a complete lie that animals and plants don't have souls. That's why when people get upset with me, oh, why don't you tell people how terrible it is to eat meat and just convince them to be vegans and stuff. It's like nothing against people that are vegan, and if you feel better that way, that's fine. I love things with faces too, but I see faces on carrots and heads of lettuce. Did you ever hear a carrot scream when you cut it? They do. Did you ever see the bleeding that happens when you shred vegetables? There isn't a difference in compromising an animal or a vegetable, or a human being, actually. Eventually, once we get to Ascension Earth levels, we will get training in understanding some of those things better. It's not held against us. Some of the things that are normal to do here that are horrendously violating to other things. Because right now, you can't just say, I quit all of it, because you'll kill your body. And if you kill your body, you're going to get stuck in the grids here. Your body right now is your salvation. If it dies of natural causes, that's okay as long as you're activating these frequencies. If the body just can't handle it, or if you decide on some level of yourself that, I have a chance to incarnate immediately into an hedonic body of we're calling it an aqua fairy body. It's another regenesis program that is part aquafarian human and part our generations of humans. So there is the option in the host to, if you feel that you're not going to make it with the body, don't let that terrify you. All right? A proper bardo, if the body can't hold it, will come automatically, but it will be a bardo that there's an intervention on that allows an immediate incarnation up into the new earth ascension field. So you will be able to incarnate directly there. That's an option that's not usually there unless there's a fully hosting system, which there is here. So by using the technologies that will assist us to get through a full ascension with the bodies we have, even if there's something in the body that can't keep up with the pace or whatever, you will still automatically catch a line into the new earth and it will actually be a version of this body, its coding as it would have been at 33, combined with a portion of your own consciousness from Eartha that has a piece of your Eartha self, because we have portions of ourselves there. And they hold part of our query codes. They came from there originally. There's a little bit of a query in everybody in Seeding 3 because of the regenesis efforts that were done between 12,500 BC, there was another one 11,500 BC, 11,000 BC, 10,000 BC was the last one. So from that period, they're recent periods of regenesis, there are still coding alive. So it's not, I don't think they're ever going to give severe bardo training, right, where, oh gosh, you're going to die, or, this group of people is going to die, so we've got to train them how to do this, or they're going to get caught and have to, and get shredded through the ring of fire, and then at least they'll get to go back to the Edens. There will be a lot of people that take that path, and believe me, it's better than the fall path. But there is, because the host is here, and as long as the host is still here, and we have the Gyrodome and the ascension earth that it generates, we will be able to, anybody that are working with these frequencies, that work with the simple crystal heart healing technologies that are going to come out about this, will be able to actually automatically, if the body won't make it through this, there will be an automatic intervention by the connection to Eartha that working with the Adashi techniques will actually give you. And you will be able to, you'll be taken through up into the Adashi things and what are called the Aurora platforms. And you would be able to immediately choose what kind of incarnation you want that looks kind of like you, but has some upgraded coding that would clear the karmic miasmic imprint that blocked the body you had from getting through. All right? Because some people may have, it may be a time thing. That, if I had like 6 more centuries, I could slowly get through the regenesis, but we don't have that long right now. So you don't have to be afraid of death. While the host is here, if you're working consciously with the frequencies, even if you're just doing the meditation tapes, it's going to come down to a very easy program. A program that we can just put meditation tapes out there in the New Age movement, probably with a different publishing name on them because we're like the black sheep of the New Age movement. Everybody hates us because they're teaching Metatronic science, and we exposed it. Anyway, it will be something that not just coming to workshops should be able to do, but we're trying to get a product line they haven't given us exactly what they want out there yet, but they want to reach people in two ways. Through DNA activation art, where they're actually training me to be an artist. So I can do paintings and like have a cover identity as an artist and get paintings out there. Right now they have me doing 3 murals. Well, I did 1 and now there's 2 others in progress. Canvases would be nice, they're smaller. But these are things they're paintings, this is what they have me doing. Paintings that will actually hold the frequencies just by somebody looking at them. If there is anything in them that has the desire for the ascension, it will automatically begin the linking them in to the host waves that is being set here by the Aquafarian shield, that is being run by the people who are conscious and care enough to learn about this and to do it consciously. So they're using art, and they're going to use meditation tapes as well. They will be assisting people with music. There are many musicians among us. I'm not one of them, but there are many, and they will be assisting with music. They will be assisting with art. They're in the creative forms, because there's going to come a time when there's just too many words and too little time. We're getting real close to that right now. With the amount of technicals that need to be explained, sometimes a picture or a dance can paint 1,000 words and run the frequency and the cognition that needs to be there. And you can like slow it down and write it down later. There will be a time when we hit that point, but it's not yet, so we'll still keep going with the words. So that is the Christ star vehicle when it's in full ascension. There would be a big orb around it. There's numerous orbs inside of it. You've got your auric layers, each layer having its crystal orbing. And when you go into full orb, the body would actually disappear inside, and the whole field, all the polarization layers would disappear, and it would be just one field of spirit consciousness. It would be half spirit and half manifest consciousness. And then you could like turn into various orb sizes of light and go wherever, and then remanifest yourself and slow down and become manifest again. That's what we're aiming for. It's such a hoot to do it. It really is, and it really did. We've probably been through at least one where we got through one to some degree, even if it was only a planetary level or a solar level, where we at least got up to the next density level so we know what it feels like to fly, because that's what it's like. You don't need to be an angel with wings if you know how to fly with the kryst. The wings are just energy constructs. You don't need to be bird people to be able to fly, and technically you don't need to be Albert Einstein to figure out the way the universe works. So we're at an interesting point now. Let's see, I think we're going into now. I'm going to do these quick. I'm ready to fall over. Another one. That's just showing it to you clearer, without other stuff all over it. All right, you have shields. Shields rotating, all that kind of stuff. All right. Every one of these is extremely technical. Another one? Ah, yes, this shows you the Christ star vehicle. You will see this shape inside what is called the crystal heart code. All right, it's at the center of it, and it is an elevator. An elevator forms where there's a chamber that runs down and the chamber that runs up, and allows you to go from Earth to Ascension Earth, up to Eartha, if you can hold the frequency to go full Christ star activation. Then there's another set that takes you from Eartha to Sirius B in density 2, and another from Sirius B. There's also another way to go over through the Sala gates, which is not as high a jump as going directly to the Sirius B one. You can go over and then over to the Sala one, which is what we're going to do tomorrow night, and then into the Sirius B one from USG4. So at USG3 Eartha to USG4 Sala over to USG6 in the Edon levels, which would be Sirius B. So anyway, this, you'll see that form of the Christ star as an intrinsic part of what are called the Navajo passages. The Navajo passages are the spanner gate systems that are part of the gyrodome construction that is part of the host. And it is a Christian host construction. So anyway, that's just showing you that looks like that in relation to the fields of the Rasha. Now, what does that mean? If our body was bigger, remember how our body was bigger and our Rasha was little? Right, we had our little Rasha mentor self over our shoulder. If this is the Rasha body, when we go into full Christ star, we got small when we went into orb. So the orbs are smaller because out here would have been the big size of the body. So when you go into orb, when you pull into a Christ star to move from one place to another, you actually condense your energy, bring it in, and then re-expand it back out into light body. You pull into Rasha. So your whole form actually gets smaller, more energized, and more condensed. And you get to the point where you can take it right down to a single point of light. And you go, really tiny orb. And then bring it back out into manifestation when you get to the place that you want to go to. That's what time travel is about, space-time travel. That's what ascension is about using the right gates to get into the right cycles so you can be part of the living life flow of the Akashi going back to the Adashi and the eternal Krystic circulation of energy between first creation source and its manifestations. Next one, please. Almost there. This is just something you'll see tomorrow because we'll use them. These are what we've talked about the ring tones and the span tones that directly activate the bodies. And there's a certain configuration to use them in. And you have a better copy of this. You typeset this, didn't you? Somebody did. Because I remember seeing a typeset copy, but I don't have one. But these are the tones that we were using in Peru to do the rapid activations of the finishing the Rashala body activations and doing the core activations of the Rasha A body core, Rasha A body, no, Rasha A body core, when there. And we used them to assist in anchoring them. Once there's a little tiny group of people, just local people that kind of spontaneously showed up together and visiting us at Shaylon, or at our house where we're living at Shaylon, which is one of the key sites to anchoring Spanner 7. And we ended up, they said, would you do this? You just go out and do this in the atrium and do these activations, just do the tones. And we did. And then they told us later what that was about. Oh, we just anchored it for them because the Adore there was a changing of the guard where the Ettore, or the Aquafarian races of Earth here, because we're in such of a dire straits on this planet. This is an awfully big mission, and we're trying to learn as fast as we can to get the bodies up as fast as we can. But there are certain obligations that went with that contract of the Aquafarian shield that were handed over to the Adore side of the Aquafarian races, because they're not in a fall position like we are. So they could handle it better, so we could focus on the bioregenesis and getting our shields up as fast as possible so we could make the transitions. And that happened. When was that? That was after Peru, right? And before something else. Can't remember. It was not too far after Peru, which was in May. I think it was in June, wasn't it? Do you remember? I don't know. It's written someplace in this massive file called History Stuff that I keep trying to assemble a history book. And I can't even, I've got all sorts of bits of history, but even from the year 2000 AD to now, the last 7 years, all of the stuff that has gone down on this planet with the invisible war that's been taking place, it's just like someday we'll have time to sit down and keep track of it. But we use these tones, and we'll be using them again, and they're going to show us other ways to use them. Because once you're using them for not just activating your Rasha body, elemental command becomes a joyful thing. Because you can play with clouds, and you can send them pictures, and they'll say, okay, and they'll do that. They'll make shapes for you. You can start to see what are called the cloud cities and actually physically access the right ones, because there are some not nice things up there in our skies too. There's all sorts of things. When we will start playing with tones, this is the first part of activating the Rasha bodies. But there's all sorts of songs to sing that bring the elemental forces together in natural Christic ways for all sorts of different things, of manifesting, healing, all sorts of things. So anyway, next one please. Almost there. Well, that set's not even in there, is it? I'm going to jump right in. Okay. This is taking ages. Anyway, this is just showing the same, the core, the inner, the middle, the outer, the Adashi cycles. And this was just showing all sorts of technical stuff. You know what? I am going to do this in the morning. Before you do that, I will come down and do this last set. I just realized I haven't even touched the vertical map set yet, and I need an hour for that, and I'm not going to do that tonight to get to Eye of God set. All right. Okay. They just said do the Eye of God set right before they go into the Eye of God meditation, so it's fresh, so the sequence is fresh. That makes sense. Okay, thank you. Did you do that, or it sounds like them? That's coming vertical direct. It's not coming at an angle. sometimes you can feel the line. That's part of learning way back. Had to learn to distinguish the line so we could tell when anybody was trying to tap it and do nasty stuff or send words in that didn't belong. We went through all sorts of stuff of learning to tell what a line was, where it was coming from, who it was, and whether it was authorized to access or touch my fields or not. And we have a lot of protection when we work with that. But that's why we've managed to, despite all sorts of people out there in the FA land that don't like me at all, would have loved to have chewed me up and spit me out by now, they haven't been able to touch the work. They can harass me, they can wear me out, make my fields tired. But what they have not been able to do is tap the line and change the meaning. And the beloveds make sure of that. And they know that I would actually activate something in my body that would kill it instantly before that would happen if they ever got me in a compromised position. That's part of a speaker contract, actually, where there's an out clause that if anything gets in and you're going to get snatched, you have an obligation to drop the body there. They'll get you out to Eartha, but you've got to, you can't let something run around with those gate codes opened and with the knowledge that they can pull and twist and make a mess of. So anyway, yeah, what we'll do, this I'm just showing, this I'm going to start with tomorrow. This is part of the new stuff that's just coming in, showing the cycles. All right, what we're going to talk about when we get into the Eye of God, I will show you a picture of the structure of the Eye of God. All right, and I've already let you know that all the way at that first creation point, right, before the Taran's born, that is where the first one is created. And it's part in the spirit body behind the first creation point door and part in the manifest field. And it is from there that the first and core currents emerge, the tunnel of love, the lava. It's also known as the kryst blood, the blood of the kryst. And it is, they call it, I think it's pearlescent silvery white when we take the journey. So when we get into that more heavily, I'm going to show you that before it's going to be the last thing I'm going to leave you with. But when we talk about how the Eye of God forms, that takes a while because there's a sequence. Of course, there's always a sequence in time. But it has to do with the triad forms, and then something happens at the end of the little triad, Partike 1 and Partike 2 cycle. The triad cycle is the first trimester of the Siddha cycle. And then something happens where that triad actually crystallizes. It starts to pull into the center, and it gets condensed and crystallized with what would have been the spark 4 of the triad, and it forms what's called the Kusha crystal. And then the Kusha crystal starts quantum replicating, going in and coming back out at times x its quantum. And that is how the Eye of God structure is built. And some of them come out in front of the creation point door, some behind. And this is where you start to get the bases of matter, be it 1/3 out, 1/3 out, 1/2 out, 2/3 out, 3/3 out, or 3/3 in, like the spiritual body, in front of or in back of the creation point door. So that has to do, that cycle that we will start with when we come into tomorrow. I'm going to go through the Adashi maps to show you where the Adashi temples are. They're saying that's better to do it that way, even if I have to put down my pen because I'm going to be in translation then. Come down to do what I was going to do next. Because there's another pack. I'm looking at that and saying, oh, it's getting thinner, it's getting thinner. It's like, oh my God, I just finished prana cycle, I think. Oh, yeah, we didn't even touch part 2 yet. Yeah, but we will. Part 2 flows, and there's not huge amounts of new data yet in there. Maybe there's going to be. That's why they're going to do it tomorrow. You'll still get it. But here's where it's called the Akusha cycle, where the Kusha forms right here at the end of the triad cycle. And then the Akushate complex forms. And the Eye of God structure is the beginning part of the Akushate. And then after all that happens, that's the second trimester. In the third trimester, this is where you have the Rushate structure of the spirit body forming. And I think that's half in and half out, but I'm not sure because that's the stuff we don't have yet, that all these diagrams need to be done, right, by tomorrow. And then when that's finished, there's the Rishate cycle, where the Risha body, the spirit body, is formed. And from that comes the birth of the Taran. All right? So this is the stage we're going to go into tomorrow. We're going to talk about this. But the Eye of God is part of this one. And I will leave that as the last image, actually, that I think we look... Oh, that? All right. The Eye of God image and the crystal heart image, which is the shape of a spanner gate but it is also the shape of the fields that activate in your own fields when you go into Christ star activation. So it is a natural configuration. It's not somebody decide they're going to make a gate this shape. The gates are the shape. They're like chambers running, like tubular chambers that run, and they kind of make a sort of like a figure eight, but it's not exactly a figure eight shape. But they are chambers. Imagine as if you could like go inside of them like big tunnels that curve, right? And there's a central column that runs up that is like an elevator chamber that runs between Earth and Eartha. And the mid-stop point, I believe, it would be the first beginning parts of the Ascension Earth, the gyrodome aurora field Earth. So anyway, we'll cover this stuff. This is stuff that's just incoming. But at least we got these placed, where when we talk about the cycles, this is the Hara cycle. Here, this whole thing refers to the Hara cycle. And the first part of the Hara cycle would be here, and that's the kale-krista. No, the kale, what is it called? Kale-hara starts here. And we go through, and I believe it's here, so I'm still trying to figure these out, which part of the kale is what's fit where. Here's the first 45-degree shift. That would take us to that point where we could do the half and half. It's considered the halfway point in the Christ star activation. That would be the point where we could begin to slide, where we would have the biological ability to de-densify the matter enough to enter slide zones physically. The glide zones and slide zones and span zones are all the same zones, except spans go all the way up to the spanner gates, go all the way up to Eartha for full-on starfire, which is full-on entering Adashi activation. Then we have the halfway point, which would be going into the Ascension Earth fields that are a step down from Eartha but a step up from Earth. And that is called sliding. And then what we do first is the beginning activations, where we're kind of like entering the base of the gate sets. And that is what we do when we project, when we glide. They call it gliding. Then you learn to slide, then you learn to span, maybe. But even if you can only slide right now, slide to the Ascension Earth will get us to the point where we will be able to eventually span with Ascension Earth and go through a full Christ star Adashi turnaround. Anyway, let me find the Eye of God picture. First, the Eye of God, yeah. Which one do we have there? Because some of them, yeah, that's a decent one. After many, many thingies that happen, yes, this structure forms. If you look at this side as, let's say, Source projected its energy out ahead of itself, the focus of its consciousness, and creation point was right there, right? Things in front of the creation point, in the direction of the source beam coming from behind, would be going into manifestation. And things behind would be in what's called the spirit body. This structure that I think we're only seeing the first 7 cells of the Eye of God structure, and it gets bigger too, and these got here by a very complex set of charts that showed what's in front of the door, what's behind the door, what's a third out, what's 2/3 back. I mean, we had to. This, for instance, this one with a little star around it, that is the kusha crystal that we talked about, that the triad finally compresses at the end of its cycle and turns into a kusha crystal. And it has a particular structure. There's certain things inside of it. But for now, it's just showing the shape and where it's placed in the Eye of God. All right. This is the creation point door right there, going from where we are out here in the manifest fields through the creation point door back into the spirit body. The whole thing is taking place in the consciousness field of Source. But we have a spirit body that actually spans, and it goes around the entire manifest creation as if we were in one large particle in the consciousness field of Source. But right now, when we go all the way out here, we're in the outer domains, go back to the inner, middle domains, to the inner domains, to the core domains. When we get to the end of the core domains, right at the creation point door, that stuff that's behind it, that is where the spirit body starts to form in those Sita cycles. So the Eye of God is they call it the Eye of God because it actually is structures of lenses. These are spheres within spheres. And they're structured very similar to an eye a literal eyeball, as far as the shapes that come out here. In fact, at some point, yeah, I think they already showed me, like, we're 3, right? This would be the iris. This is looking at the side view of the eye, right? If you were looking at the front, it would look like an eye does in the front. But you can see a lot more about what's in manifestation and what's how many steps behind that door by looking at it from the side view, where you could see what's behind the door and what's in front of it. And this eye picture goes with it, where it shows the iris, the eye of God. Iris would be here. The lens would be sphere 5. And each of these spheres forms from a very specific set of things. Sphere 1, well, the kusha is number 1. And the kusha times 1 forms sphere 1, but it's 1/3 behind. So the kusha is half and half, and this is actually 1/3 manifest and 2/3 not. So that's where you have the times 1 quantum. Here you have a times 2 quantum. The quantum is the kusha being replicated. All right, that quantum. So it's kusha times 2. And then you have kusha times 3. But this is 3/3 out. Right? So here's the creation point door. That whole sphere is manifest in front of it. Right? Then you have kusha times 4, gives you this one. That, I forget what that is. That 2/3. There's other diagrams before we get to this. This was erasing things so you could see what the structure was, because there are so many lines. On the other ones you couldn't see. But there are each one of these spheres, if you draw a tube of light coming off each one of them from the core, it's a tube that runs back into the source field, back through the spirit body, and opens from the spirit body to the source field directly. And when this is open, the creation point door opens, it brings the frequencies right from the spirit body and from source all the way through into the outer body structures that built before it. And there's an eye of God structure at each point before the all right. The Partakai 1 and Partakai 2 birth, they form the triad. The triad does its little spark cycle, hits the point where it makes backflow spark 4, and then they compress and they form the kusha right there. So each time you have a Partakai 1 and Partakai 2 born for each of the domains, you end up with an eye of God structure. The big one, the first one, is the one that started with the first cycle, with the core cycle, and that is the one the journey will take you to. So you're all the way out here in the other diagrams. Out here in the outer domains, it's actually taking you from the outer domains through a very protected network that I'll show you in the morning. Or not in the morning, I hate morning. When I'm this tired, it's already morning. That takes you all the way back through the domains, right to the beginning of the core cycle, and back into this area here. We get into, it's called the tunnel of love, because it's literally a chamber like a tube, and each one of these create a tube, wider and larger and larger and larger tube that comes up directly through our rasha bodies and into our light bodies, and it's turning on these currents that will allow the spirit currents that will allow this. I know the dhalais are in here someplace. They haven't showed me exactly which they are, but they have to do with the doorways that open between the spirit body and the manifest body that allow the manifest body to pull partially back into spirit in order to orb, in order to make the transitions that go with the Adashi turnaround. So this will be the structure, and I mean the black and white diagrams don't do it any justice. It's really gorgeous. Each one of the spheres, the currents that are associated with this, where we've had heliotalic currents that were like pale pastel shimmery ones. We've had the aurora currents that were quite neon-like, but pastel, but neon pastels. We've had all sorts of different types of currents. These are pearlescent. We've had opaline currents, which are like opals with little flicker of fires running through them, and they were nice too. But these are like pearls of wisdom, they like to refer to them as. They are the pearly currents, and when you visualize them, when you see them, when you experience them, they are. Do you ever see pearlized, pretty colors of paint? It kind of looks metallic, but not metal-like. It's softer. It's pearl-like. And their colors, they come in pastel colors of various pearlescent. And the core one is a lovely pearly white one, I believe. Isn't that the white one, honey? Do you remember from the thingy? I haven't done the trip in a while. Is this core one was white, wasn't it? The pearly white one? And then there's a pink one in there somewhere, too. Anyway, it's in the journey. So this is just the beginning, and you realize when you're doing a journey, you're traveling down these sets of tubes, right? Down the center tube, here. And we're able to do it because certain ones that are assisting, certain aquafarian that are on the Adore side are actually crossing us over to what are called Adore Akusha platforms, where they can get us over there, and then they literally orb their own fields around us to be able to take us, because we don't have the field activations, even in a slide, or even in a projection yet, or a glide, to be able to access it ourselves. But once they take us through once, we have the access. And that's what's really lovely about the journey. We can go back there at that point. It means we have the beginning of being able to open the Kusha seals that go all the way back, so we can actually begin the process. It's a very rapid activation, of the core currents of the Rasha bodies. One more. And this, because it's a good one to leave people with, and I wish we had a colored version yet, but we don't because it's still relatively new. That is the configuration of one spanner gate. You'll see this in relation to what are called the vertical maps. I'll show you that tomorrow. Actually, I would like to do one thing. Actually, it's not sized to that. There is the pink, the colored one. I'd like to put that one up. The frequencies in the colored one. I've got the colored thing in the next pile. Just the what do you call it? The mural code. Yeah. If you can imagine, we're going to show you the last image is a color one that will hold a bit of the frequencies that are associated with what are called the aurora platforms that form the gyro dome field and aurora field that form the new Earth and the new ascension Earth field. And if you can imagine when you see that one, that these gates, this isn't just a flat thing, it's tubes, like a lovely tube. What did I call it? I keep thinking of a dryer. Those stretchy plastic dryer things you put on your dryer vents? Those kind of thing, right? Well, imagine it like that and just bent, but it's a little more flexible where, it hugs curves nicely and things, right? And you could, if you wanted to, float up and down it. These are frequency flows that have like layers and layers to them. There'd be a core to them, and then they come out like little spaghettis within spaghettis. But then there's these tubes. These are chambers that progressively activate that are run on the frequencies of I believe they correspond with the Rasha bodies of each of the 4 densities. And these activate, and literally you would go into the state and be able to, if you activate it in your field, see, this would activate in your field first as a natural configuration of a natural kryst star activation. But the planet has them too, and the aquafarian shield that is on this planet is hosting them, where the planet's ones can't open anymore, but the aquafarian shield can open these on a planetary level, the big ones, that allow us to move. If we can do that in our field, we can go through one of these where we would actually be able to eventually see doorways where other people that don't have it activated would not see them. And we would be able to walk through, like, into a mountain and disappear. And people just, did I just see that? Yes. Right? Because we would go in to some degree of the orb state, and it would actually, what we're actually doing is activating this in our fields, and that connects us by harmonic co-resonance directly to the a corresponding one, and there are 12 of these, corresponding one that's sitting on the planet in the host field, and that would take us first, somewhere around this level, would take us into where we could access the platform, the ascension Earth, and that would be like the halfway step. And then we get up here, these correspond, see, this corresponds to the vertical maps going upward, and up here would be where Earth's surface is, D2 surface, which means the D2 is the part that you experience as solid, right, in any of the forms. Like we are looking at the telluric D2 kingdom, experiencing it as the solid form here. Right? So this would be the same equivalent level of Eartha. Down here, right about here, I believe is where our house on the 7 one, on our Spanner 7, our little house in Scottsdale sits right there on the central, the core current as it goes up, and that connects into Spanner 7. There are 12 spanner gates. So we will talk about the spanner gates tomorrow. And the one image I would like to leave you with is this one. This is actually not a great rendition of it because I had to take a photo of the thing. It's upside down, yeah. And then I had to color it because the photo was terrible. I had to patch it together in various places and then try to bring color into the photocopied photo image with the colored pencils, which just really didn't work. What it is a very large mural on our wall in Shalon. They asked us to put it there. It's like it's going to be a walkthrough code at some point. What each of these are, as you'll find tomorrow, each of these colors corresponds to a specific band of the vertical maps. And the vertical maps are simply, if you take a cross-section of the Rasha body of the planet and the light body structure that's built on that, from the core, going vertically upward, or vertically downward, it will take you from the core up through past the crust, where the crust is, up into the atmosphere, up to where the coronosphere should be but isn't, and continuing upward. Now, since our Earth is inside of the larger star body, just at a different angular rotation of particle spin, of Eartha, it means if you go up vertically at some point, you're going to run into Eartha's surface, just like we have a surface crust. It also means our planet is embedded at the core of Eartha. So our core gates, that 13, 14, and 15 little gate set of the Pranaseed, are linked together. So there's a direct passage, and it's through that passage that the gates, the 12 of those that run in a circle around, inside of the sphere of our planet, that they connect in to Eartha. So we'll see more of that tomorrow. But what this is a color image that shows you, and it's really big. It's like big. I forget what it's. 14 by 17 wall, room, I think, and it's floor to ceiling, basically, except the floor stops here, right? Because this is actually what's down under, where this is where the house would sit, and this is where that was that spot that I pointed out on the figure 8. So the figure 8 shape would actually run up like this. This takes you to what's called the Aurora 3 platform. This is the Aurora 2 platform. This is what's called an Akusha platform that's coming in from the Adore side. And the Aurora 1 platform is down here, the subterraneans. So we'll learn about certain things, if you haven't seen the vertical maps yet, about what they're about. But it's literally a cross-section of the spheres as you go up, what spheres are passed through, because they form the planes of our atmosphere, but also of the ground we walk on and what's down right down to our core. And when we're using these gates, we are literally passing through those various layers. Now, you can send a space shuttle up way out and into other galaxies from here at this angular rotation of particle spin, and you will not see any of these things. But when you start to see cities in the clouds, you're seeing some interesting things. Because some people do see them. It's almost like they flicker by and you kind of go, did I see that? Like, boy, that looks like, is that a mountain or is that a cloud? That looks like a city over there. It can't be. That's clouds. There's weird effects you can get. Some people call them mirages. Sometimes they are mirages. Other times they are not. What you're doing is seeing bleed-throughs of various things that do indeed exist in the atmosphere. We'll talk about the Van Allen belts tomorrow a little bit, and about how they are unnatural phenomena that hold an unnatural tilt in this planet's light body structure and Rasha body structure. And they create something that's called hibernation zones, which are reverse spin zones that are run by some very nasty fallen ETs. It's also where Atlantis lives, where it sunk to. It didn't sunk, it kind of got sucked up, and it still manifests somewhere else as a three-dimensional reality field. So, there's all sorts of things we learn from the vertical maps, but the most important is how they run those gate sets that allow us to go first to the layers that correspond with Ascension Earth. And they correspond with the Aurora 1 platform that's down here, Aurora 2 platform is here, Aurora 3 platform is here, there's another one up here called the Winterlands that's Aurora 4 platform. These correspond with layers of our atmosphere going up. And because we know where the Van Allen belts are, as far as mileage up and that kind of thing, we can tell by using the Van Allen belts where, if you can put the Van Allen belts inside of the Rasha body structure, you can see in what fields, where, about how many miles up is the coronosphere supposed to be, how many miles up are the safe zones, which are the Aurora platforms that plug into the field, the Aurora field, that forms the gyrodome New Ascension Earth. So it's really neat, and there's quite a few diagrams to show on that, and it isn't worth trying to do that now, because I was going to, we can go through them. I'm trying to think of a good time. I have to have graph making time in there, and you need to do that thing for 12. 12, right. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Akusha part first. Because on your itinerary there, I have it where I take you through the Mente bit and take you into the vertical maps. That's going to take longer. I think what I'm going to do is, before as comes down to do the journey with you. Right then, so I don't have to come down and have everybody here at 9 in the morning when I have to have graphs ready for 3:30, right? So I've got to sleep in there sometime for at least an hour. Let's see, a good time would be, let's see, how many anakusha? If we have to do 12 activation, 11. Can I get it through from 11? Yeah, I can, actually. Yeah, there's not too many in that sequence. That's not too hard. Yeah. All right. How about this? I'll come down for the first time at 11 a.m. to give you the akusha part of that little bullet there under part 2 that's at the end. I look at they're doing it again. They're putting the end first. Sometimes they do that with the sequencing they gave me in the first place. So you will have the information you need most for the journey. I'll probably also throw in a bit on showing you where the Adashi temples are, because you need to go to the Adashi temple. So I'll probably give you a quick course on that, and then at some point integrate more detail on the map stuff in with the stuff that I will do in the afternoon, something like that. All right, yeah, they want me to resequence these. They want me to resequence, put the kushas first and the other stuff with it. Yeah, so anyway, you'll see what that has to do with the layers, because there are diagrams that are black and white that show specific layers that correspond with specific of those bands of the Rasha bodies and the corresponding light bodies that actually form the matter density levels in our atmosphere on D1, D2, D3, and on what is considered the density level. And our density level, if our density level Merkaba is on a planetary level and in our bodies, corresponds to the D1 level of Eartha. So going up from there, you can find the D2 level of Eartha and the D3 level, and you can find where Earth's surface is that you could walk on just like you can walk on the surface of this planet. And that's what would be a full span. If we can get you into the slide zones first, physically, that's a start, because it's a whole new world even there. It would be like a pristine Earth that's never had any of the troubles here, and there would be some very nice, quite human-looking first greeter people. They would be the Aquafarian, because they are part human cloister races, and they are part what are called Bendi Aquari. Anyway, I hope this information was enough for you for tonight, and that you're not too disappointed that we're going to wait till tomorrow to take the journey, because I had a feeling half the people are going to be asleep anyway. You know, I mean, all we've got to do on this one, it's run on the to get the wave on the CD. But it's not fair if you really want to be there and you're just so tired, you have to go to sleep. So we'll see you at 11, and we'll take it from there. And we always manage to, whatever the weirdness of the hours happens, we do get the subject matter in. I've noticed that. It might be at breakfast, but at least we do. So thank you for your patience with the time, and I hope you're enjoying it so far. We'll be saying goodbye at breakfast. Now, I know some people have, the earliest I've heard so far is 9 o'clock flight. I'm curious, is there anybody that has a flight, like they have to leave here before 7? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 7. How about before 6? How about before 5? Your flight's at 7. Okay. So you need the 2-hour check-in. Yeah. We will do our best to have it done in time for you to run for your flight. We don't mean to do that to people, but at this point, I've got what I was hoping to get done in an hour so you could do your, get the journey part done so we could move on to the next. That's probably going to take at least an hour in graphs itself and some with that. And it's important, they're saying it's important this time to get the cohesion in the database that we've been given since January. And that's what we're doing. I mean, we put time on the keys, so that was remembered and explained in a decent enough way and all of that. I still have scribbly diagrams all over the place that I can hardly read. You can't even put them on Mylar. Well, I can put them on to show you what someday will look like a diagram you might be able to read. But I'm going to have to go up after I do this session with you, as it's going to run the journey with you. Then, because they threw the stand in, or the Shadra, this was not expected. They didn't warn us about this. They just dropped it in last night. By the way, you're going to do your first large one. So there's a whole configuration that, because the size of the room, we wouldn't be able to do the full round ones, the ones that are shaped round. There's going to be a round part, and then it's going to be shaped like the crystal heart code. So there's things that Az will talk to you about how that's going to be organized. Thank God he's here, because I can do it on paper, but to get even 24 people in the right positions in a room, because it's all about north, south, east, west, what's coming in from where, what's being anchored. Now, it's not going to be a hard one in the sense that we have to, it's not going to be a dancing shield yet. We'll dance, but not, our bodies don't have to. Because with this many people attempting to try to do Merkaba spins, people will get hurt. They'll be falling over and you know, like kind of like domino effect, right? So we're not going to have to do those. It's more like a sitting chakra, and toning. We're going to be using the sound probably as loudly and quietly at the same time as we can, because by the time we're doing the actual thing, it's going to be toward the later part of, well, earlier part of the morning, I would say, after like this evening's programs, because we're waiting for the particular times when they tell us it's time to do it, because what we're going to be doing with this chadra is assisting to anchor into the Aquafarian shield the two things. One of them is called the Sala Kali chamber, which is, or a wave. It's a chamber, but there is a wave, a burst that is going to be released through that. And that's something that it's not that the beloveds are releasing it. That's what your stand is going to look like. I'm not going to explain too much about this right now, because Az will explain this too. What I am going to do is get you to the point where you have the Eye of God stuff, and then go into the vertical maps, so you see how this shape fits in with the vertical maps and what the vertical maps are, so you can do your journey, but also it will help you understand this better. But in simple terms, once this is positioned in bodies on the floor, it forms a geometric shield of electromagnetic energy in the Aquafarian shield. And it's a math language, a language of mathematics, that actually guides the elemental forces in specific ways, and this guides them into what is an organic kryst pattern, as you'll see as we move through the things that I'm going to talk to you about in a little bit. But basically, there's the Sala Kali wave is going to be released. It's being released from density 2 Sala, which is the sun. It is the host sun for our sun down here, but it is in density 2 frequency and matter base. It is opening and releasing a large wave of frequency that's coming in, and it's going to hit our planet in a specific angle, through a specific angle. And I believe, I don't know, I don't have that diagram here yet. In progress is a diagram of exactly which chamber is coming in from which direction. But there's going to be one that's coming in from over there and running through the center of this and coming out over here. And there's another one that's coming in, I believe, from over here and running that way. The other one is the Sala Sira chamber. And the Sala Sira chamber is the one that is, again, from density 2, but density 2 edonic level, going into the middle domains. And it is the Sirius B passage, solar passage, that is opening. And that is coming, and it will interface with our planet through this axis. And this has to do with all the distortions in the axis alignment between Earth and Earth that you'll see when we get into the maps. But what we're doing, these frequencies are coming into the Earth. And when we do a chadra and they can interface in a specific way, it can bend. It will bend the angles in which they hit Earth core, those frequencies hit Earth core, and allow them to go in at a natural angle as opposed to the angle they would normally come into because of the grid damage. So when we do these kind of things, we're actually assisting in the process of preventing severe Earth changes. And most of the work is done by the beloveds on Eartha and also the ones in Sala, and on the what is called the Adore side, because there are teams of Aquafarian, part human, part Aquari, races that live there as well, and they're the big teams. All right, the Adore system has certain advantages because of the type of matter base it's made of. It is a bit closer to spirit than the Ettore system is, and because of the type of matter it's made out of and its position within the Eye of God thing and all of that, which we'll get to later. So anyway, I just wanted to give you an idea of what it's about and what is it, the reason we're going to have to move scheduling. We'll cover what's on the itinerary. As far as sequence goes, we're going to finish the top part. We'll finish part 2 in sequence, and that will prepare you for your journey. But after that, instead of the I'm not going to be here to do the 3:30, 6:30 thing. Instead, after we do the journey, somewhere in that time frame, Az is going to, and he's going to figure out what times he wants to do that, go through kind of like an explanation of how we do this. All right, what we're going to do, where we're going to sit, how we're going to align. You know, the thing is in the room, we won't be able to move the chairs for the practice run, but at least you'll get the explanation of the technicals. And again, anybody that doesn't want to participate doesn't have to, but it helps to let Az know so he knows how many bodies go where. Because it's all numbers as far as what bodies are where and how you position them in a configuration like this. In simple terms, you'll see later that this is actually, when you make them on the ground and they activate, they stand up. Right? And they become three-dimensional energy constructs, starting at the center point and moving out, and they get much bigger than the shape of the shield that formed them. And what these become are interface links directly to the spanner gates. This one will link into what's called Spanner 7, which you'll see what that is once we get through the earthen maps. And let's see, anything else on those we need to say? No, other than it's going to be a very interesting evening. Okay. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Well, that sounds good. There's also I'm glad that the people who have been working with the music, and they're doing a wonderful job. I'm so thrilled that they're working with the sounds. Thank you all. The Song of Aurora, both verses, will be part of the activation in this Shadra, as will the ring and span tones, probably, I believe, for the outer domains. They're going to accelerate the process of the outer domains, I believe. I don't think they're going to completely finish it, because that's not due till May, but maybe there's a surprise I don't know about. I mean, we just completely went over the whole 12 tribes, too. They were supposed to do the Rosh Hashanah body. They just blew that right through because it had to be, or we'd all be getting the Dali trainings as far as to how to do the back step. So you'll be using those sounds, and I have a feeling there's something else that's going to come in when I go up to take down the transmission. So for now, what I want to do is get you through the rest of part 2, so you're ready for the journey. After Az does the things that he's going to do with you somewhere in that 3:30 to 6:30 period, there will be a break. And that is after the journey. I'll do the journey first, then the thing with Az. There'll probably be a break between those because the journey is long. And it's good to get up and kind of like stretch and come back into body, and roam around and use the bathroom and stuff if you need to before you'd have to do the next spot. But then there will be some kind of break in there for dinner within the restaurant hours where they're not closed, so you don't get to eat. But then I will combine the part 3 and 4 and 5. The beloveds are going to show me how they want that moved around as far as the sequence of graphs and the new graphs that have to be done while Az is with you here, and while you're doing your breaks, I'm going to be getting the new graphs that are extenuations of these, and I don't know how far I'll be able to get with it, but enough to cover and give you, we should be able to give you at least an idea of where the parts of all the bullets on this itinerary fit together. And this is just new information. The whole day 2 was new information that's being given. So I'll do my best with that. I'm going to see, here comes the wave. I'm going to take my jacket off. You got a little bit before, but I just got a really big burst. So what we are going to go into is we're going to go back to the Eye of God information. And this is where that started. Just to remind you, I'm not going through the whole Partakai process again, but remember you had the first Partakai, second Partakai. That led up to the formation that eventually births the Taran. But right in here, there's something that occurs, and that is the birth of, first, the Kusha crystal. In simple terms, the Kusha crystal is, after this first and second Partakai start doing their spark things, and they have made 2 atmic sparks and 1 etheric spark. It goes atmic, then it phases up, etheric, then back down, atmic, and then it spins again to phase up, and etheric. It makes the backflow spark for the etheric, and at that point, when that backflow spark, spark number 4, goes into the center, I don't have that diagram, but when that goes, it's after all this, when that goes into the center, the Siddha cycle begins and takes place way before the Taran is born. And the first thing that happens is that original triad, which is the Partakai 1, Partakai 2 in their split form. That actually compresses as it goes. It actually goes back through creation point into the spirit body, compresses and forms a crystal. It becomes crystallized with spark 4. So you have Partakai 1, the original Partakai 1, the original Partakai 2 remerged together, whereas 1 and 2, and then spark 4, which is an equal quantum, but it's a different type of energy because it's made from the sparks. They condense and they form a 3-point. It's a crystal with 3 quantums in it, and that thing is called a kusha, and the Kousha, and the kusha crystal starts the process of the birth of the eye of God structure that we saw. And we saw a bit of it, enough to see the eye shape and get an idea. But we're going to see how that forms and more of what it applies to in this next series of diagrams. And it happens, this would represent, if the triad, forming of the original triad with Partakai 1 and Partakai 2, that period where it's making those first 4 sparks, is considered trimester 1 of the Siddha cycle. When it goes into trimester 2 of the Siddha cycle, that is the point where the kusha is born and it starts trimester 2. So that's the space we're in the Siddha cycle. Now, let's see. This was what we saw last night. And remember, this one that has a little rays around it just to make it distinct from the other one that's the same size. This is the kusha. And remember, the kusha is the original quantum in the building of this eye of God. The original quantum that has in it the spark number 4, Partakai 1, and Partakai 2, the original Partakai. So when a kusha forms, and it forms each time a set of Partakai do their thing, make a triad, then the next thing they will do is form a kusha. And that kusha becomes a quantum that starts a replication process. The first is a ×1 replication. So the quantum of a kusha is replicated ×1. And quantums are measured in terms of Partakai power. The power of how many Partakai. And when you take Partakai back, they go back to what are called rus and ers. And when you take those back further, they go back to things called ohms and yans, which has to do with stored electrical potential or expressed electrical potential. And this goes right into the electrical. So in a minute, I'm going to show you how how this shape came to be. And these are spheres. And this is as if you were looking from the side view. Now, you can also view this as if you're looking from the top, and at another point they'll have us do that. But right now they're having it look at this as if this is the side view, like if it's an eye and it was looking this way, right? So it's a profile of an eyeball. Behind it, behind this point, is the spirit body, where the spirit body forms. And then there's a larger one that actually surrounds the whole thing. The manifest and the spirit exist within a full body, and I believe that's the Risha body that we'll talk about later. But for now, this is the first creation point where that first Partakai started, and this is where the kusha forms, the kusha crystal, and the kusha crystal forms half of its quantum is in manifestation in front of the door, of the creation point door, and half is behind. So this circle here with its half line, right? Part of it's forward and part of it is behind. If you were thinking in terms of an eye facing this way, it would mean part of it was out here and part of it was back here, invisible in the spirit. It's going to tell us something. I have a feeling. I've been getting little bits about the diagrams they haven't showed me yet that have to do with the chakra system in the head and how the eye of God structure and some of the things it does applies directly to our brains and our eyes as well. But this is the big eyes. These are the eyes that create the rest of the spirit body and form the manifest structure. This is where it starts. So we have the kusha, which is the kusha, and then the first replication of the kusha, and it replicates, it pulls into the spirit body and replicates quantum. First is ×1, same quantum that is held in the kusha. The next one, now with this one, notice though, the kusha was half and half in manifestation, half in spirit. This one, even though it's the same quantum, there's only 1/3 of it in manifestation, and 2/3 of it are in spirit. It forms a different type of matter base. The next replication is a ×2 replication, where this quantum ×2, and if you measure these, this sphere from its center point is, you could put 2 of these inside of that. That's how we get the shapes, right, to do the ×2, the quantum. So the shapes of them, the sizes of the spheres in relation to each other, are directly connected to the quantum of energy that is held within them and the replication factor. So this one here is the times 2 replication. And what we're doing again is quantum building, is building quantum. When we get to here, now this one, the times 2 one, and if you notice these little points, these are the points that refer to the center point of that particular sphere. All right, so this one, if it were half and half, that center point would be on the halfway line, half in front and half in back. But this one has 2/3 of itself into manifestation and 1/3 of itself in spirit. The next one is 4, and that's a times 4 replication. Was that 2? No, that was 3. Wait a minute, I'm getting my numbers here. Yeah, that's 2. That's times 2. This is 3. Here's 3. This is the next one, times 3 replication. This one is times 3 of the original quantum, and they're all that is the original control quantum, is the kusha, and these replications are all built on replications of that quantum number. And the times 3 one is fully out into manifestation. And this applies to a type of matter as well. And this is the type of matter that when we get into the larger structures of the spirit body that have to do with where we see where the yuga cycles fit, where the 4 yugas fit, the outer domains would be similar to this, where they're connected to spirit, but they don't have any of their main matter base in spirit. Their connection to spirit is through the other domains that have connections that go closer in to spirit. So this is the sphere 3 times 3 quantum, and that's completely in front of the creation point door in manifest form. Then there's the 4th one, which goes here. That one is here. Colors will help with this at some point, where you can see which ones are which ones. All right, so that is the 4th one. It's times 4 quantum. And the times 4 quantum's center point is here, which means it's got 2/3 of itself in front, in manifestation, and 1/3 of itself behind the creation point door. And it's interesting, is these create like lens effects, and I do believe that there's going to be a point where they have me go into understanding how the eye, a human eye, works, just in general, because this structure, the way these spheres interface with each other, they form lenses that do things, and these are literally the lenses of projection, where the currents coming from the spirit, from source field, right? They're like the optic nerve. So back here somewhere, you have where the boundary of the spirit's body would be, and from that point, it would be the open consciousness field of source, right? From that point, there's an opening that comes through the spirit body and comes through, just like bringing frequency through what's like our optic nerve here, sends it outside, and then there's all sorts of things that frequency does, or that energy does, those streams of core flows, as they're called. They come in, and there's a whole circulation pattern that I don't have down yet, but where they come out and they interface with the spheres and the lenses, and they bend, and at a certain point, that's actually the manifestation current, the current that is coming in to make something manifest. You don't see it manifest yet. It comes through and then interfaces with parts of the light body structure and the rasha body structure and splits in certain ways and then comes back in. And that is somewhere in that process is where the hologram of matter is actually made. And our bodies work this way too. We're actually projecting out our hologram around us as we go. So this structure is the beginning of understanding that process more deeply than just the transduction sequence that we've explained in the Kathara books. So here is the sphere 4, and sphere 5 is here, times 5 replication. And they're not just spheres. Some of these have little balls in them, little spheres, little cells within them. But this is the structure of the size of that particular part. The times 5 quantum is here. That, I believe, is a half and half. Yeah, that one's a half in, half out of manifestation. 5, 6 is here. So 6 has only 1/3 of itself out in manifestation and 2/3 of itself behind. Yeah, it might be quarters. Is that one quarters? No, that's thirds. Okay. And then 7 is interesting. This is 7 in its contraction state. It expands and contracts. So you have 7 in its contraction state is here. And I think is that half and half? Yeah, that's half and half. And then in its expansion state, it's still half and half, but it gets really big. And it comes out this way. there's a fascinating process that I don't know if I'm going to have the time to get the diagrams done because they're brutal as far as structure goes. Just the time frame we have to try to deal with circle templates with many, many circles and things. But there is actually on this side of the door, when we've looked at the diagrams that simply showed the four yuga cycles and then the 3 adashi cycles, and we just showed them. We didn't put circles, but we just made little compartments for representing the core, the inner, the middle, the outer, and then the 3 adashis going back. Well, if you put in those little compartments, if you put a sphere that represents the whole structure there of that like core domain structure from its outer bodies to its rasha bodies and all the way through, those spheres actually form what's called a transfiguration wave, and it's formed by this structure where you would see the 4 spheres at a particular size coming out here, and then in a very specific place, those 3 adashi cycles that in the diagrams we've shown so far are compartments above. They would actually be running through on the same line, on this core line, kind of like accordion fashion. And there's a process by which, through the movement of this, not only is creation, is the spirit body created and the beginnings of the light body, but the entire structure moves back and forth into and out of manifestation, which is fascinating. I don't know if I'll have time to get those diagrams done this time because they're quite complex, but I might have at least a rough version. But you'd have those 4. And it's basically, you have 4 spheres and then 3 at the half points in between them. And there's certain like crystal locks between them that are the dhalais, that are the doorways between each ones. And then there's the bigger ones that are the doorways that allow for those spheres to progressively open to each other. And there's certain things that happen in this whole structure that actually pulls the whole set of them back into spirit. And then remanifests them back out as backflow. And it's a fascinating process that I'm just starting to understand, because the Eye of God teachings were given for Tribe 5 class, and that was June, I believe. And so they just started giving us this information. But it's an amazing organism that we are looking at. It is a living, breathing the manifest body of God's source. The consciousness of God's source is not quantifiable, but the manifest body of God's source is, and that is the cosmic body. And this is at least one part of it. And if this is just one particle sitting in the middle of the consciousness field of God's source, I wonder how many there might be and what pattern they might be arranged in. So this is at least understanding what cosmic structure is in relation to the cosmos we are in. Maybe that's all. Maybe there's just one. That would keep it easier as far as diagrams. But knowing how spirit works and what I've seen so far, I doubt it's that simple. But this particular structure, with all those other structures that have to do with light bodies and all that come out this way, there's a whole set of structures that go this way and this way behind the door of spirit, and then there's this massive structure that they all exist within. And the massive structure, I believe, is the Risha-te body. But before we get there, we have the Risha-te body, and that didn't happen yet either. We're still at the Kusha formation and the Eye of God formation that forms the Akusha-te body, or the Akusha-te matrix, as they call it. So this one, number 7, expands and contracts. And it stays where it is on the half and half line, but it expands and contracts because it has certain cells within it. And what this has to do with the entire process of manifestation yet, I don't know. But through these interactions, this is where literally our holograms get projected out in a way very similar to how the human eye works. So this tube of energy that we talk about going to the Eye of God and through the tunnel of love, we're referring to, if we're out here, say in a sphere that represents the outer domain, there is a tunnel, a frequency tube that opens from each of these balls, actually, from the tiniest one all the way out to the largest one. There are pillars of energy that come off and outward to us that feed the systems out here. When we go through this journey, these tubes, the center one is actually opening, and we're getting a guided run because we don't have the codes yet to open all of the seals for like the outer, the inner, the middle, the inner, going back to this one to get to that one. So it's a guided journey where the Adore people, the Adore Aquafarian, are taking us. with opening the doors for us. But because once we get there, we pick up the codes. So we can then go back and forth. But we're actually traveling to here, into the Eye of God, and going into this space behind here, into the kusha space, and what is called the lavas. The lavas are the core flows. And it's an amazing journey. So you are literally going down what, if this were a tunnel or a tube of kind of like pearlescent liquid light is what it feels like. But it's not wet. It's that liquid that's liquid, but it isn't a wet liquid. It feels like a dry liquid, and you can breathe it like air. It's an interesting matter quantity. Each one of these have a specific type of matter base that they form, specific quantum to it, specific polarity to it. They haven't gotten into all that yet, fortunately for me. We don't need to understand all of those. To understand that that information exists in the most complex physics formulas come out of all of this stuff. And I'm so glad that I never even took physics in high school. I have a 10th grade education. I didn't even get geometry. I got algebra twice because I moved, right? And that was it. So, and they said that's a good thing for me. They said for the translations that I have to make and the transmissions, if I had studied those things, it would have complicated matters trying to get this information through. And if it was complicated to get it through, and I'd be expressing it in physics formulas and all of that, it wouldn't have helped people that aren't physicists to understand. So it was important to take me with like not even a full high school education in math, to where they could explain the math in simple terms, because it's complex and it can be expressed in huge complex terms, but it is also quite simple in basic terms. It's about polarity and different numbers. So adding, subtracting, they're useful. Multiplying, that's useful. But basic things, you can understand at least what's happening here. And what happens with these structures is what is creating what we call the laws of nature, or the bent laws of nature out here, because the laws of nature as we know them here operate differently than they would in a natural crystalline place, because they are distorted, because the planetary grids are distorted. So anyway, this is very spiritual and it's very physics all at the same time. And we are explaining it from the spiritual end, but trying to show you enough of the physics where you can see where that goes and how that, where the science and spirit come together. So we will be traveling here. At some point, there's a passage, and I believe it's only at certain cycles when all of the yugas come together, and say the cosmic cycle, where the whole cosmos will actually pull in and recharge. Now, it doesn't multiply every time it pulls in. I don't know what the point is. Like, once it's first created, the multiplications happen, and after that, it's just a recharge factor. I believe once creation is set in motion, what is created will pull in, and the quantum of its replication, its backflow return, becomes spark pulse currents that just re-energize the structure, so it's eternal. So these structures are, once the Eye of God structure manifests itself through the process you'll see in a minute, it's an eternal structure. It doesn't die, it doesn't go away, it doesn't lose energy. And these are parts of the structure that connect anything in the outer manifest world, like you, directly to the spirit body that is a part of your own quantum, that there's a cosmic spirit body, and we each have a smaller version of that. And this is what in these dhala activations, where we're opening the tube, opening the doors between on the central current, to allow us to be able to progressively move through and pick up the frequencies, because eventually a starfire is when the thing pulls back in through creation point and then comes through a cycle of coming back out again. Eartha is going into starfire. That's soon. That's 2047, 2052. We have longer to worry about a full starfire, and there are levels to it. The planetary level, solar level. This would have to do with the smaller structures in the outer domains that are smaller versions of these cosmic structures. But right now we're talking about the large one, the cosmic structure. That would be in the cosmic Risha body, spirit body, that holds all of it, that all creation is within. And beyond that, the only thing beyond that is consciousness field of source, where you can't even draw a diagram of what that looks like, because there's not even a boundary. It would be, if you tried to even put it on a page and put a dot and say all of this is that dot, it wouldn't even give you a concept, because the page still has boundaries, it still has limits. So there isn't a boundary. It is not quantifiable energy. Next one, please. I'm going to move a little faster now on diagrams, because we got a pile of them like that again. Yep. Here we go. Oh, I just love this one, especially since the top part got cut off. And I had key little notes to myself there. All right. remember we have Partakai 1 and Partakai 2, and they made their triad, and when they hit spark 4 came in, the backflow spark came in, and that's when the whole thing kind of contracts and did this crystallization. It gets stuck at creation point door and squashed into a crystal. If you think of heat, the compression, if you think of heat and the compression that happens, it forms things like diamonds, right, in the earth. It's kind of like that, where these quanta got pushed and compacted together, and they form at the creation point, and they form the kusha. So this is the kusha. The kusha is specific. It has the quantum of Partakai 1 in it, Partakai 2 in it, and spark 4. And at the center point, you have the creation point door. Now, this part of the kusha, remember, is half and half in spirit and half in manifestation. Right? This Partakai, this will take us for a minute to a Partakai. Partakai aren't just a thingy that you can't put numbers on. Partakai are a very specific quantum of energy. Partakai become the measurement that's used in a lot of the things that we do as far as the Partakai power of this, right? Like 33 and a third, the power of 33 and a third Partakai, which implies there is X amount of power in a Partakai. You can take that smaller, and it begins to translate into words we've heard out here before. One Partakai equals what are called 360 ek. One positive charged ek equals 1 ohm. All right, that's where we're starting to make the electrical connection. This can all be expressed, these quantums can all be expressed in terms of ohms. And ohms are a word that is used to express certain quantums of energy here. That, I mean, because you get, when you get your electric bill, I think there used to be some part that talked about ohms and those kind of things. And I don't know the electrical end here very well, which eventually I will probably study more about. But the ohms are, okay, we have one Partakai is 360 ek. 1 ek, an ek is a positive, and it's the equivalent of 1 ohm. All right, an ek comes in negative and positive. I'll put it this way: ek comes in negative and positive. It is a specific quantum. That would be the smallest quantum. A positive charge of the smallest quantum is called an ohm. A negative charge of the smallest quantum is called a yan. All right. So if it's a positive charge, the ek will have is an ohm. And if it's a negative charge ek, it is a yan. So an ohm is a positive charge ek, and an ek is the smallest quantum. And an ek is that first spark. Sound of one hand clapping when the first X spark is made, and that has to do with a whole body of data. I'm still trying to find. I know it was read in, I think, the Tenerife workshop, where they went into more heavily into pre-Partakai creation, like how the Partakai got there, when we talked about how the source consciousness focused on it and it started to gel and that kind of thing. There's a whole thing that got into quantum on that, and that explained it more fully, and it was only briefly covered. And I remember it was scribbled in red marker, the whole thing, and there were pages and pages of it, and I can't find it. So I'm going to have to go back through the Tenerife tapes and see if that's where it was read, because I do believe part of it at least was read. So anyway, there's more to explaining where'd that ek come from, because it came from that phase, the pre-Partakai creation phase. When you understand that, then we can start talking about things like ers and rus. All right, 1 Partakai equals 360 ek, or let's see, 12 ers, I believe. 360 ek is 12 ers. Yeah. See, this is the part. I'll have to do these when I scribble those back in, because I don't have the original paper master, and the Mylar one cut it off. Let me see. All right, 15 positive. Yeah, here we go. 15 positive ohms. All right, positive charge ohms, and an ohm is a positive charge ek, right? So equals 1 er. And I believe there are 12 ers in a Partakai, and I believe 12 rus in a Partakai. Their whole, altogether, the Partakai quantum is 360 ek. Part of it is negative charge, ohms, and part of it is positive charge, yans. The larger increment from when you have ohms and yans, if you look at ers, you have 15 ohms is 1 measurement of electrical energy, electromagnetic energy, and 15 negative yans is 1 ru. So you have ions and Ru expressing the negative charge electrical currents or quantum, and ohms and ers expressing the positive charge electrical ones. The only reason I want to touch on this now isn't because we have to go through a heavy-duty course on this, and as you can see, there's lots of numbers that happen here. There's something that once I explain how these thingies get here, I'm going to explain something else about manifestation and spirit, because there's something that forms between the spirit pulling backward and the manifestation energy pushing forward, and it creates a tension field. It's actually much more complex than this, but you can discover what's called G-force, or gravitational force, by the relationships, and this is where that force is formed, by the relationships between how much manifestation push has how much spirit pull on the other side of creation point door. And this becomes important in the ascension process to understand the 0G point, which has to do when you get equal quantum on both sides and it releases. There is no G-force in between. Because the G-force ends up becoming the differential. The difference between how much is going out and how much is going in will give you a G-force. And that gets into the gravity force as it's measured here on Earth, in NASA and those people who play with all those things. So this is the beginning of understanding. There will be a point somewhere where how G-force is explained, expressed, and understood where it comes from here will dovetail into this information as well. But the G-force factor, as far as understanding what we're doing, if you can just see that in a minute you'll be able to see, I'll show you how it comes out of the quantums and what you have to do to the numbers. It's actually brutal. To find the actual G-force number, you have to be able to not only say, okay, this is 1/3 behind the creation point door, and that's negative pull, and that's 2/3 out. You have to know what the quantum is, right? A quantum of what has 2/3 of itself out and 1/3 of itself back, right, in order to get the numbers. So it gets a bit complex, and you can express all of those in terms of how many would that be, which means how many ohms would that be on the manifestation side, and how many Ru or ions would that be on the spirit side. All right, so it's fascinating. All of this, each one of these spheres that you're seeing strung out on a line here, represent what together, from at the same creation point, form the Eye of God structure. So these are those numbered spheres. We had number 1, which was a ×1 replication. All right, this was the original quantum here, which was the kusha. Now the kusha itself has the power of 3 particai. Right, power of 3 particai is 1 particai equals 360 ag. So it would be 3 times 360. All right, so part of that power is in manifestation, and the other, or half of it is manifestation, half of it is in spirit. And that would give you a 0G point. It's a 0G form of energy. Let's see what this comes down to. Let's see. I'm trying to see what I do with the numbers here just to get it across. So out here, let's see, 180 positive ohms, 2, 3. Power of 1 kusha, original triad. I'm trying to see if I did this on this one. Yeah, it's been a while since I did the math bits on here. P sparks. Kusha crystal, original triad, power of 2 particai. All right, kusha crystal, original triad, power of 2 particai, plus the from P2 spark 4. That's the power of 1 more particai. So that gives you the power of 3 particai in the kusha, but also has plus 1/3 of a particai eron, which has 60 positive ohms and 60 negative, so it's 120, I believe, is the full power of an eron. An eron forms at the center of this. So this is, I'm not going to go through all of these right now, because for me to stumble my way through these, it will take us probably way into this evening. And then we have this evening that will have to happen some other time, so we can't do that. But I wanted to see the complexity of the Eye of God stuff, not just the pretty balls sitting there and forming different things. They're spheres, and if we ever get them in nice color drawings, they'll probably be really pretty. They're also very specific quantum. This is replication 1, replication of that quantum. So it's all of replicating The power of 3 and a third is considered the divine variable constant. The power of 3 and a third partakai. So you have 1 partakai, 2 partakai, 3 partakai power, and a third at the center. So that is where we get the divine variable constant of 3 and a third partakai power. And then that can be translated backward into, okay, well, 1 partakai has this much, and this much ohms and this much yons, and you can take it right back into those formula. I think I've did that here, and I can't even. I'm not sure what I did, and I haven't checked them, so I don't know if they're right. Let's see, 1200 power. Yeah, I'm not even going there. We're getting into this by divided by that, times that. The important thing to know about the kusha with its divine variable constant of 3 and a third is that is the quantum that becomes replicated times whatever in order to form the spheres that form the eye of God. They call it the divine variable constant because the iron at the center, this is connected with the flame that we've talked about much earlier. Sometimes it pulls in completely into spirit, so it would leave the power of 3. And other times it comes back out, and it would have the power of 3 and a third. And this has to do with the cycling of the eye of God structure and that kind of thing. So that's how you can get a variable constant. It is a constant. It is the constant quantum that all of eternal life creation is built on, but it is variable in the sense that the third sometimes goes away and sometimes come back. It sometimes goes away, sometimes come back. And I do believe the whole quantum sometimes goes away and then sometimes comes back because there's that movement in front of and then behind creation point door. And again, this is the behind creation point door side, and this will be the manifestation side. So the currents are coming from the God source field out here into the spirit body through that center line and then coming out into manifestation. So the times 1, first replication. The whole kusha goes in, replicates its quantum. Kusha comes back out where it was at creation point door, half in, half out. And the quantum that it makes has the first replication it makes has the same quantum. So kusha rep 1 is a times 1 rep. Times 1 is 3 partakai, which is, they're just leaving the third out of it right now. The power of 3 partakai times 1 equals partakai power of 3. Okay, 1 kusha quantum minus 3. What is that? 3 partakai times 1. 1 kusha quantum negative. I don't know what I can't read my writing. Is what my problem is. 1 kusha quantum times 2. That's a times 1. Okay, that's a quantum. I'm trying to see what that word is. Partakai power, I think. 1 kusha quantum is 3 partakai power times 1. Yeah, 1 kusha quantum is 3 partakai power times 1. All right, so it's the power of 3. So the times 1 rep has a power of 3 partakai, and 1/3 of it is in manifestation. Or this was half and half. 1/3 of this is in manifestation, and 2/3 of it are in spirit, which means if you draw a line to do the math, and this represents this line, the line manifests here, spirit here, you have to take, you have the power of, you have 3, a quantum of 3, you have to divide it by 3, and one of, which is 1, so 1 would be on the manifest side because 1/3 is out, and then 2 of that quantum, 2 partakai power quantum would be there. You add them together, you've got the 3 whole quantum, but 2 of them, a quantum of 2 is on the 2 partakai power is on the spirit side, and 1 is on the manifest side, which means there's more spirit power pulling than there is manifestation power pushing. Now, on some of these, I don't know if I did it with this one because it gets tricky when you get into negative numbers, but I think I did. When my brain is working and I'm not doing 20 other things with graphs in my head at the same time, I can do the numbers on these, and that's the state that I have to be in to do these kind of graphs, to do these kind of translations. But I think I've got it pretty accurate, where, okay, you have 1 on the 1 partakai power on the manifest side and 2 on the spirit side out of a cumulative power of 3 partakai power. The 1 partakai power is 360, okay? That would be positive. Positive refers to on the coming out into manifestation, because this is getting into the mane and the ire and those kind of primal forces we've talked about, that I think they're going to plug some of that into the graphs for this evening. So you have a positive going forward, clockwise spin, all of that positive charge in manifestation. So you have 360 ohms, power of 1 partakai. 1 partakai is 360 ek, and if it's positive, it's if it's all positive, it would be ohms. So there's 360 ohms, and ohms can be brought into ers. We're 24 ers, and that goes back up to how many ohms in an 15 ohms equals 1 Okay, so we've got 360 ohms equal 24 I think that's how that works. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just trying to show you the basic math and then what they do with it to get the G factor. On this side of spirit, you would have power of 3 partichae, which, all right, the power of, power of 2 partichae is 720. Power of 1 partichae is 360. Times that by 2, you get the 720, right? Then this is yons, expressed as the spirit pole in negative charge, yons. And so that equals, I believe, 45 Ru. And Ru is a reversed right? You have ers going out, which are units of electricity, and then you have Rus pulling back, which are the opposite of that. All right, so you have power of a positive 1p minus a power of positive 2. So this is where you get a negative 1p materialization force, which gets into the G force. All right, the materialization force, you have manifestation that's going that way, you have spirit that's pulling that way, and what's left between them gives you the G force and the materialization force. What energy, what quantum is left to come into materialization that can be used to form things on the manifest side. So when you subtract, in simple terms, when you subtract the quantum power that is in the manifest side, when you subtract from that the pull of the spirit, you get what's called the materialization force. And that can be expressed the same way, like it can be expressed in ohms and yons or ers and rus, or simple partichae power. All right, this one gives you a partichae power of positive 1 minus a partichae power of 2, and it gives you a negative 1, which means there's more pull going this way to spirit of negative 1 quantum, and that quantum being a 360 eq quantum. So this is just giving you an idea of how these work and how what these little notations of math mean on each side. At some point, we'll get into understanding more. There's something else that happens. You have materialization force, but then certain things happen with the iron at the center that, as far as the full formula for G-force, I don't know if we have yet. It has to do with, there's also a joule force. There's the G-force and the J-force. The J-force would be the joule force, which is stored electrical potential. And there's the G-force, which would be the differential between the manifestation push and the spirit pull. And then there's something else, too, and I forget what it is. There's another force in there. So there's lots of numbers with quantums that interact in specific ways to get what our science here would call G-force, to get the strong nuclear force, to get the weak nuclear force. The strong nuclear force, they have said, is actually this. It's the Ru force. That is actually from the inside of things, from the inside of atoms, holding it together. And the weak nuclear force, I believe, is associated with the I'm not sure if that's Manu or Mana, but they're going to eventually show us where those things we've learned about Mane, Manu, and Ire as the 3 primal forces, how they're actually expressed. Then we have the mana and the prana that come from those, and there's also something called Ira, and there's a bunch of other oses type currents or type of matter and forces. They're going to show how they connect to the 4 known forces of nature here that science uses, which are simply the force of gravity, the force of electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force are identified as the 4 primary forces of nature here. And they all come from this structure. So we have the times 1 replica. 3 partichae times 1 equals power of a quantum of 3. All right. This one's a times 2 replica of the original quantum. So you have Kushrep 2 is times 2 replica, 3 partichae, which is the power of the first, times 2 equals partichae power of 6. So a quantum of 6 is 1 Kusha quantum, 1 Kusha quantum times 2. A Kusha quantum, which is power of 3. We're just leaving the variable out of it at the moment because it's a lot easier to do the math. So this gives you, each of these give you a different type of matter. This actually gives you the, I think think this one is associated with etheric, but I thought the half and half was. I'll have to see if that's correct, but I think it is. Oh, this is, all right, thank you. There's a difference. This is what would be considered full etheric matter, right? That we talk about etheric matter. This is etheric atomic, all right, when we talk about etheric atomic. So I didn't realize there was a difference, and they just pointed it out there, because they'd said this was etheric, and I said, wait a minute, we've also said etheric is half in and half out. Which is actually behind. Which is it? And they said this is etheric atomic, so there should be a word atomic there. The next one is telluric atomic. All right, so the stuff on this side becomes the atomic, the things that come. Telluric is what the D2 frequencies are made out of. The dimensional structures form. Remember when we talked about the Rasha bodies, and at the final end of the formation of the Rashas, that 15 set of, the 15, the sphere of 15 Jaleesic layers, then did a times 4 replica, and it made 4 sheaths where you had the 4 sets of 15. Wait a minute, excuse me, I'm getting interrupted. What? Sorry. Okay. What time? Wait a minute, I got to... Okay. Already? You're kidding. What? They're giving me a parameter. They're saying we don't have to do the journey at 12:12, but as long as it's after that, but like not midnight after that. And they're saying, yeah. In other words, get on with this and get to the rest of it. Yeah, that we can deal with this, just so you can see where these numbers are coming from. They're saying just read this bit. This is telluric matter, and the telluric matter is formed by this particular configuration of energy, which is Akusha. It's the Akusha 2 replication, which is 3 partikai times 2, and times 2 replication times 2, and that gives you a quantum of 6. And of that quantum of 6, 2/3 of it is in front of the door, which is manifest, and 1/3 of it is back there. So that would give you take the quantum and you divide it by 3, and then find how many of those thirds are out here and how many are out there in their quantum number to get the quantum numbers for what's pulling back to spirit and what's pushing out to manifestation. And then you would subtract the spirit pull from the manifestation push to get your materialization force. And there's something in there that has to do with the joule force that I don't know if they're exactly the same thing or if there's one more set of these subtractions between things that you have to do that has to do with alons and joules. But the G-force is associated with the materialization force, which is the differential once you take the spirit pull away from how much thrust is going outward into manifestation. These things become important in terms of what's called light quotient. As far as when you are attempting to go into ascension, there is a joule content. All right, the joules are constructs of energy that we talked about, the prana joules, how they're formed. They hold prana, and they hold quantums of prana in a stored form in certain parts of the body, and it might be right behind the creation point door. I have to see. They haven't fully explained where exactly are my joules, that kind of thing. I mean, they're stored in certain parts, like the seed atom, because we've played with the joules and the keys that are in the sacred sex workshops when we were phasing the monadic core of the seed atom. But there's more to learn on joules. But the joule quotient is like energy behind it that under certain conditions can be brought into manifestation, and that will allow for the matter that's already in manifestation to receive more quantum or more power from behind the spirit door that will allow for the de-densification to take place that is associated with making the shift into the Adashi cycles. So it's a natural part of ascension, and that's why they're at least trying to show us how the numbers basically work, how where numbers fit into this kind of structure. The next one is the times 3 replica, and it's original Kusha quantum of 3 times 3, which gives you a quantum of 9, and this forms the atomic type of matter. When we talk about D3, when we talk about D1, D2, D3, D3 is a form of atomic matter. D2 is telluric, and D1 is etheric atomic. So that means they have as their primary base these quantums of energy, and they will have a G-force and a joule force that is associated with that quantum of energy. So matter that is manifest out here can be taken back to what type of energy it is made out of, and knowing these things, you would be able to find out, okay, that is made of this type of energy. It's primarily an Ira carrier. It has a quantum of this. You would be able to find the G-force of things and the joule force. You'd be able to tell how many joules. Right now, what they try to do, they actually find joule force by burning something, and that's how that's how they get the little calorie listings on foods and those kind of things, where they burn something and see how much heat is released from the burning to raise X amount of water, X amount of degree, that kind of thing. That's how they determine how much joule force there is. But here, they don't look at joules as an actual substance. They said once upon a time, back in like the medieval days, that it was thought to be a stuff in there, stuff that was in the atoms. And it actually is, but it's just pulled back beyond where it's visible. It's probably in the Rasha template. All right, yeah, I was just kidding. It's not all the way back behind creation point door where the spirit body is. It's in that in-between space in the Rasha bodies. So it is a force that when you do Rasha activations, it begins to bring that extra force of energy, of natural energy, back into the body. Okay. Times 4 rep is down here. I'm not going to go into these numbers, or we'll never ever get onto the next bit. Can we lift this up a little, please? Thank you. This is a times 4 rep. Oh, and this one, by the way, the times 3, all of it is in manifestation, which means all of it's pushing outward, has no spirit pull back on it. And if it weren't for the fact that it's connected to the rest of the eye of God, it would go flying off into existence and never return. But it doesn't, because of its connections through the eye of God structure. When we look at the things here, we have D1, D2, and D3. The atmic energy is the one that's fully out. All right, fully out into manifestation. This is also, I believe, the primary matter base of the outer domain, and that's why it ends up where it's easy to get lost out here, why falls occur out here, and those kind of things, because it has a vulnerability, because of its only connection to the rest of itself is through connecting with the body before it. We're actually made of part of the Edonic body and part of the Edonic body from the middle domains and part of the body from the energy fields from the outer domains. When we see, as we get through this a little bit, we'll see a little glimpse at the larger spirit body that has to do with the eye of God, and we'll actually see that from chakra 4 down is naturally connected to the middle domain currents, and from 4 up in the embodied chakras is connected to the ones here, and then the ones up over our head are connected to the next domain. So we'll start to see how the chakras fit in with all of this too. Anyway, times 4. Kusha rep times 4. Power 3 Partikai times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. Has a Partikai power of 12. And of the 12, 2/3 of it are manifest, and 1/3 of it is behind the line. So you can do the math, and it's giving you the quantums again. And then when you subtract what the manifestation force from, when you subtract the spirit pull from the manifestation thrust, you end up with the materialization force. What force is left to materialize into something, and that's associated with the G force and the joule force. Next one, please. Kusha rep 5 times 5. Power 3 Partikai times 5 equals 15, quantum of 15. All right, with half in manifestation and half in spirit. This is another one of those. They didn't give the types of matter yet for these. All these would be a different type of a matter base, as when manifesting out. But this one, this half and half point, this is where you would get a 0 G force when you subtract what's out here, and you subtract 7.5 from 7.5, you get 0. There's no differential. There's actually no materialization force, which means you dematerialize. It means you go into creation point, door space. It means you go into Rosh Hashanah. All right, if you reach that state in your body, it means you would go into Christ star activation. And Christ star activation, once you've made that swing, people who have made it into the Adashi cycles, they can bop back and forth into these cycles wherever they want to. It's not that you're up there now and you can't come back here. They can go back and forth just by consciously modulating their field. And once you know these things, you don't have to sit there with a pen and say, okay, I want to go down there, and that needs a BPR of this, and that means my thrust has to be this, and I have to have this many joules. It gets to the point where you just think where you want to go, and the rest does it automatically. When we're making these transitions, it helps to understand the process, because that opens certain conduits of the process itself to allow it to happen. But it becomes where it is all about thought, where you just think it and you go. and you'll turn into light and end up there, and you can manifest. You could change your shape, you could shapeshift, you could do all sorts of things once you were an Adashi master, one of the ones who have mastered and know consciously the arts of ascension as they exist in the natural Kryst creation. Excuse me, which is the first and the only eternal life creation, by the way. Okay, so that one is half and half, and that's Kusharep 5 with a quantum of 15. So it has 7.5 push into manifestation and 7.5 pull back into spirit. This next one down here, Kusharep 6, it starts to get complicated after this. Kusharep 6, as if it weren't enough already. Power of 3 Partikai times 6, Partikai power of 18. It has, let's see, this is different, okay? Let's see, is this 2/3, 1/3? Yeah, all right. If I take that sphere and divide it into relatively 3, I think it has, no, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has 5 parts of itself, 5/6 in spirit, and 1/6 in manifest. Yep, that's what that one is. So one little bit in manifest and 5/6 of its power in. And then we could take it down, but I didn't even have time to take those down into their ohms and all of that stuff. Next one, please. There's still more. There were 7 in the eye of God. And if I can explain this one without tripping over myself, it'll be good. The next one is a bit more complicated. After it forms the times 6 rep, it comes in again, makes another replication. This forms what's considered the first unit of equilibrium. And I don't know why they call it that, but it's the polarity equilibrium. All right, it's called the heart of God. The first polarity equilibrium is born. And what it does is, okay, there's rep 7, which means it's a times 7 rep. Kusha rep 7 is, it takes Kusha rep 6 times 6 and Kusha rep 7 times 7. And it does this thing where you end up, and I forget how I got that, but it's the right one. There's 21 manifestation push and 105 spirit pull. And this makes it move. So these spheres start to expand and contract. There's something that happens with this. It's a lot more complicated than just that formula. You start with that formula where you end up with this going in a manifestation and that much pulling back. But there's something that happens with them that's probably a dissertation in and of itself that creates this equal set of spheres. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 spheres. There's one of those is on the center, half and half. And then each one of these, there's 3 behind and 3 in front. This has to do with, I have a feeling they might use this diagram to begin showing how the yugas actually form later, where they're spheres, they're sphere cycles that happen, and they expand and contract. This gets worse. This is called the allure, by the way, and it's called the first 7 suns that create the eye of God. All right, next one, please. All right. Now, I took a step back to make it easy. This is the eye of God structure. But this... Any of those chambers coming in yet? So I just... Okay. On the eighth replication, the eye of God is born, where the whole thing goes in that you saw so far. The heart of God goes in. But there's also a phase cycle that it goes through once it pulls in with the 7 balls sparking and with each other. And I don't even have the text on that. But what results is this unit. As a full unit that because of that 7th one that has those balls that have particular quantum that make them move, sometimes pulling backwards, sometimes pushing forward, this whole thing solidifies as a moving unit where certain spheres pull back in at certain times, and you can imagine some of them are going back, some of them are coming forward, and the whole thing creates the lens structures that actually bring currents out into manifestation and circle them around. Some of it becomes matter, some of it becomes... They said something to me that I'm still trying to figure out. That they said, you think that gravity is a pull, right? You think that, the apple falls from the tree and is pulled to the earth. You think that you're being held down. They said, it isn't. It's a push. Oh. They're saying the pull is the strong nuclear force inside. I believe I got the right one there. The one that pulls from the inside, and it's stronger than the one that goes over distances, but it's weaker. So the strong nuclear force is a pull inside. There's a relationship between that and the energy of the light body coming where the let's say, for a very simplified example, the mana or manifestation energy comes out from the eye of God. It interfaces and currents split. Actually, there's a splitting of currents. The mana becomes prana and mana. Mana does one thing, and I believe the prana comes back. Prana may be associated with what is making the push of gravity, because it's what was the manifestation force coming back, doing a circulation through the spheres of the light body structure, and then actually coming back to the source it projected out of. And when you think of that as the planet, like the planet's shooting energy out, and like it has at least the 12 directions that go with the fire chambers, and plus its staff and its rod, they would be the main energy circulation things. With that energy being sent out, goes out someplace, but there is at some point a coming back, and it's how much quantum is in the energy that's pushing you back down in relation to how much pull you have in the from the strong nuclear force inside of your atoms. It's also pulling you back to spirit. So one's actually pulling you back to spirit. The other is pushing you back to spirit. And then there's something in there that I think is where the joule force comes in. That is a differential in there that it will determine what type of matter, whether it will be a solid matter that is crystallized light. There's some part of those currents that on their way back in, when they hit the currents pulling here, there has to be another type of energy that I don't know about yet. That's one of the names that is probably like one of the main forces broken down. Like we have mana makes prana and mana. There's other ones. Ire would make certain things, and I think that's connected to it. But if you have something pulling on you this way, from inside back toward creation point, you had the mana come out, but now it's circulated back, and some form of it is pushing back on you. You're getting pushed back into spirit. There's something else that's coming out and crystallizing and holding you in a balance point where you're not being sucked back through creation point door, and you're not being pushed back through, because both of those forces are going back toward creation point. Right? So the mana, when it turns around, ends up going back to a creation point, just like the strong nuclear force is pulling you back through creation point. There's some other force they haven't gotten into yet that forms the matter that we know, and it's like a crystallized skin. Part of what is light coming back at us, or EM energy coming back at us, is actually bent in certain ways that it compresses by the relationship between these forces and forms what we refer to as matter, and the matter skin that we walk around in here, because we're really made of light, of crystallized light. And the crystallization has to do with the compression factor, and there would be quotients involved with depending on which current it is that's coming back at you compared to which one is pulling you this way and which one is pushing outward. There would be all these formulas that have to do with the quantum of energy. And it all comes down to G-force. Under certain G-forces, you will have something pushing in you this way and pulling in on your strong nuclear force enough to make it so you're stuck to a planet. You can begin to levitate when you can neutralize those forces and go into a zero G state, and that would change the relationship between what's pushing on you to form gravity, what's pulling on you as a strong nuclear force, and whatever the quantum of that force pushing back out is. So when you brought the push-in force and the push-out force into equal quantum, they neutralize each other. You would have no gravitational pull whatsoever, and if that wasn't balanced and done the right way, you'd probably go flying off the planet and into space. Yeah, I mean, gravity is a good thing in certain ways. It keeps you where you can walk around in a domain. Right? So anyway, this eye of God is where all of this starts. And these are the currents. When we talk about in the meditation journey you're going to go in, going into the tunnel of love, that's this one. See, these are all like tunnels. They're actually currents of energy. A tunnel, but as if it's filled with, say it's filled with water, but it's breathable water, right? That kind of thing. These are flows there's flows that go back into source and come out. So I think they both have flows that go in and out, and I don't know if the outside one comes outward and the inside one pulls back. I think it might be that. But each one of these, if you look at where they came from, you take the size of the first thing, and I believe that's the Iran, the Iran point at the center of the Kusha. You would have the Iran flows. They're considered the core lavas. And there would be a tube of energy coming out. And then inside of it, there would be the same flow going back in the spirit body. That's considered the tunnel of love, or lava. And it's going back into creation point. So when we do this journey, that's where we're going. We're riding that tube. As we activate Rashtrale body and begin the Dhala activations, what we're progressively doing are turning on each layer of these currents, turning on each of the spheres, bringing the currents from those spheres directly into the Rasha body, then into the light body, and then directly into the matter body that forms through the interaction between the Rasha body and the... Oh, cool. Matter forms between the interaction between the Rasha body and the light body. Okay. So we are turning these on in our bodies and in our fields when we are working with the Rasha body activations and the Dhales especially. Next one, please.